What's the most unhinged thing you've caught on surveillance footage? I had a game camera out once, and a neighbor who'd just walk through my property any time. I didn't care, the place is just pretty big and there's no back fence. But I kept having sheep go missing, so I set out a camera. The camera caught my neighbor walking by, and then like 30 seconds later, a frickin' mountain lion walked by it, stalking him. It apparently never attacked as he was fine, but he had no idea how close he was to that thing. I used to work overnights at a hotel and would monitor the security cameras. They'd detect motion, and a little indicator would blink when motion was, well, detected. Anyways, it always gave me the creeps when I'd hear the elevator ding. I'd run out to the lobby to greet the guest, to make sure they didn't need something or whatever, and nobody would get off the elevator. I'd watch the tapes and see the motion indicator blinking on a floor, then see the elevator open on that floor, then see the elevator open on the ground floor and the motion indicator blink on the camera down the hall. It gave me the heebie-jeebies. Also, one time I was in my office in the middle of the night, and it sounded like somebody banged on the door with the side of their fist. Just one single slam. You can see me reacting to it on the video. My head whipped around to face the door where the sound came from, then immediately whipped around to stare at the camera to see who the frick was outside my door. There was nobody there, and none of the motion sensors had picked up anything. Not fun finishing the rest of that shift. I was house-sitting in a huge house and set up a canary camera near my bedroom. I had an uneasy feeling that somebody else was in the house with me, so I set up the camera just to make sure nobody came near my room. In the middle of the night, somebody approached it from behind and turned it so that it faced a blank wall. Then a few minutes later, it turned it back the way it was. It tripped the canary and I got a notification on my phone. I saw it and searched the house thoroughly the next morning and I never found anything. Needless to say, I slept with my door locked the rest of my time there. I have a home security system with a camera that watches the living room. I saw my cat and my dog both sitting in the dog's bed. The cat frickin' hates the dog. I think she was possessed. Theirs is a forbidden love. Goddamn pets. I mean, that is so funny because your life would objectively be better and happier if your pets got along whenever you were home. Like them pretending to hate each other with you around serves no purpose other than stressing out their owners. I blame the cat. I worked in a maximum security prison for a while. I was assigned to central control one night, which is where the camera screens were. One of the cameras was for the classifications room. I glanced at it and there was an inmate in there. It was super odd because it was 2 a.m. and nobody was supposed to be in there. Everyone that had keys to that room went home at 5. Anyway, so this inmate was just sitting in there doing nothing. I got the sergeant's attention and told him somebody was in there, and I gave him the spare key to the room. He went to go check it out with a couple of other people, but by the time he got there, the room was empty. They searched for like 15 minutes, but there was definitely nobody in there. I used to have an apartment pretty close to my office. The office building was kind of in a business district, but it was also kind of off on its own relative to the city's commercial district footprint. I sold the apartment, and before moving into my new home, I left my bicycle chained to the building's bike rack. It was only going to be there for a few days in that no man's land before I was finally able to move it to the new place. Anyway, one day in the middle of the week, I came into the office, walked past the bike rack, and noticed that it was completely empty. The building has a bunch of security cameras, and one more or less is facing the bike rack since it's adjacent to the front entryway. I sat and watched the security tape with the IT guy. We're watching, we see everyone leave the office the night before, see the bike, keep watching, and then all of a sudden, poof, the bike is gone. We slowed the tape down, and it seemed like when you're watching digital cable or satellite and the image gets garbled. Literally, it was bike there, then poof, gone. In the tape's timestamp, it literally happened in 1 second. I assume my bike got taken to the upside down. Did the IT guy edit the surveillance footage to make it look like his bike straight up disappeared? The ultimate grift. I work in security. During the weekdays, I'm doing parking, while weekends I'm at the desk solo. I'll always remember this one Saturday. It was the second shift ever working the weekend, and I was watching the cameras when this one guy came to the side door. He looked around inside, and just before I could activate the speaker to let him know he was on private property, he looked directly at the camera and stared what felt like a minute. When I took my hand away from the button, he started to walk away. I ran to the side door to see if I could see where the heck he was walking, and he was just gone. The only thing in that direction was more frickin' wall. So, to this day, whenever I'm watching the cameras, I'm waiting for this guy. This happened a few years before I started working at my current job. The elevators in my building go down to the first and second basement. Late one night, one of our security guards spotted a group of people heading into the elevator at level 4. He thinks it's curious because nobody's supposed to be in the building after midnight, so he keeps a close watch on all the lobby cameras to see which floor the group alights at. The doors open at basement 2, but nobody comes out. The second guard scurries down to the elevator doors while the first keeps his eyes on the cameras to make sure no one has left. When the second guard gets to the basement elevator, he looks puzzled and searches around. He comes back to the guard station to confirm that it is indeed empty. Putting the building on lockdown, the two guards spend the rest of the night combing the building together, but they were unable to find anyone or anything. They decided to call the police, who reviewed the footage and see the same thing. In the end, the sighting was still unexplained, but my workplace decided to stop being cheap and installed security cameras in the elevators as well. I edited together the footage from the security cameras outside Pulse before, during, and after the tragedy there. Though there were many sad or disturbing things to be seen, the strange one was a wounded man that appeared out of nowhere. He waved his hands for help and the cops came over and carried him to safety. I tried numerous times to rewind to find out where he'd come from, but he was just there, or he wasn't. He didn't crawl to where he'd gotten, he kind of just appeared there. He looked like he made it out okay at least. I used to work at a place which was required to be manned 24 hours a day. The reason being is that I handled sensitive documents and files, and if somebody needed this information in the middle of the night, I'd have to fetch it for them or confirm that I had it. Anyways, security was kinda tight. Bars on the windows, multiple locked doors to get to where I was. They'd give me work to do during the night, but underestimated how quickly I could get it done. So, like most nights, I finished my work in like 30 to 45 minutes, pulled out my phone and played games and Netflix browsed and Reddit, since nobody else was in the building. So now it was getting to be the last third of my shift when all of a sudden I hear a door close. I look to the security camera and see somebody walking down a hall towards my room. At first I thought it was just somebody that had come in, ridiculously early of course, so I turned around and waited for them to come in. But then nobody came, and the hairs started raising on the back of my neck. Now, this isn't really a big building, so I figured I'd find the guy wherever he is and just start checking offices and storage rooms, but I came up empty-handed. However, I do see that a fire door has been shut. I go to try and rewind the camera, but the digital recording is password protected and I don't know that password. Anyways, the whole thing had freaked me out. The way that person was walking down the hallway like a determined walk right to where I was. So I sat with my spine tingling for the last couple of hours of my shift, and finally people started coming in. My replacement shows up and I tell her what I saw, and at this point I figured I must have imagined the whole thing. I'm told to go home, and the manager and girl who replaced me would look over the camera. After getting home, I called my manager and asked what was on the camera. So they said that the video showed the fire door closing, but then the video froze for about an hour. The next thing it records is me reopening the door. Okay, there are a lot more ghosts in this batch of stories than I would have suspected. Honestly, my money was on you people catching people doing the deed all over the place or pulling crimes, and instead we got some supernatural stuff. Way to pleasantly surprise me, Internet. Loss prevention officer here. I see crazy stuff go down all the time. One of the creepiest things I've seen was a string of toys moving on its own down an aisle. It was like a duck with the smaller ducks behind it. Of course, I had to investigate it. When I zoomed in, I was surprised to see they were real ducks. My brother-in-laws own a pub. One night, all of the alarms start going off. This is unusual because if you were breaking into a place and the alarm went off, you'd quickly grab something and run away. For all of the alarms to go off, you'd have to have a whole bunch of people running amok through the pub, or one person who just doesn't care about the alarms. Brother-in-law calls the police and races to the pub. One of the front doors has been smashed to pieces. A giant rock is laying on the floor. One of the bar areas has been disturbed. A lockbox is missing. The pub appears to be empty. He stands outside the door so that nobody else can get in. The police arrive and they do a sweep. Nothing further is found. They review the footage to find a drunk man staggering up to the door carrying a giant rock. It doesn't take a big rock to smash a glass door. The rock was bigger than a basketball. The guy holds it above his head and throws it through the glass door. He casually steps through the smashed glass. The alarm sounds, but he doesn't appear to notice or care. In no particular hurry, drunk man walks behind the bar, opens the fridge and pulls out a bottle of cider. He drinks it and leaves the bottle on the bar. He then starts looking around for money and finds a lockbox with a couple of $1,000 in it for a footy tipping competition. He puts the box on the bar, grabs a bottle of Jack Daniels before casually strolling out into the night holding the bottle and the lockbox. The police found him at the railway station. He was asleep on the bench with the money from the lockbox in his pocket. Next to him was a bin containing a broken lockbox and an empty bottle of Jack. I can only assume this criminal mastermind thought he was pulling the heist of the century in his drunken stupor. I should point out that to this day they have no idea where that giant rock came from. The pub is opposite a park which doesn't appear to have any landscaping rocks, and the nearest house would be over 150 meters away. It took 2 people to remove that rock from the crime scene. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I don't work in surveillance, but I used to work at a college and I had to review 18 hours of security footage once to see who was vandalizing some bulletin boards. It happened sometime between noon on Saturday and 8 a.m. on Sunday, so I had to sit there and review the footage. I watched a half a dozen couples fight, this guy off his brain on green herbs staring at the bulletin board for probably 10 minutes at 3 p.m., a drunk girl in heels fall over and drag her 2 other friends down with her. They then rolled around laughing their butts off at 9 p.m., a couple doing the deed in the hall at 11 p.m., a guy in a chicken costume going for a stroll at 3 a.m., and then some shady dude in a hood wander around and press his ear to the doors at 4 a.m. About a year ago, I had cameras installed around my house, initially to catch mail thieves. One morning, after noticing my back gate ajar, I reviewed the footage from the night before. I watched as a would-be burglar, at 3 a.m., pried open the gate and crept towards the living room. He suddenly stopped and started backing away when he noticed I was home and awake. I was actually just a few feet away in the living room with the blackout curtains closed. He must have spotted light peeking out the bottom of the curtains. The motion-activated lights kicked on as he simultaneously ran out the back gate and into the woods behind our yard. I was awake, transitioning to a mid-shift, and ironically I had a table full of weapons as I disassembled them for cleaning after a day at the range. It's probably good that I didn't see or hear him that night. We both would have freaked out. I used to work security at a college dorm, and I once witnessed one of the doors on a washing machine slowly open itself and then proceed to tear itself clean off the machine. I told my boss this creepy story and showed him the video, and he made me review camera footage for the rest of the night to find out who broke the washing machine, despite the fact that he watched it break itself. I believe he ended up writing up the last person to use it, even though that guy didn't do anything wrong. I'm so glad that I don't work there anymore. I used to see little crescent-shaped light orbs floating around the back dock of a nursing home that I did a little security for when I was young. First time I saw it, I thought it was a reflection of a flashlight and that somebody was screwing around behind the building. I jumped up and ran to that door, only to find out that it was pitch dark and no kind of movement of any kind was going on. The only explanation I was ever able to come up with is that it had something to do with the electrical panel energizing when the AC units would kick on. I don't know for sure, but that little theory made me feel a little better. Also around that time, the nurses found a cat that had been deboned, sprawled out on the sidewalk in front of the healthcare entrance. The paws and skull were the only hard bits left. Ugh. I have cameras on my front and back doors that send video to my phone when they detect movement. I was out of town and woke up seeing several police officers walking around my front and backyard. I called my neighbor to find out what had happened, and I found out that somebody had crashed their car through my back fence, which borders the highway. I helped a friend install a camera inside an elevator. The mall guards had a special hard drive for interesting footage. They showed us an elderly couple making out inside an elevator. It wasn't creepy because they were old, but because of how sweet Grandma and Grandpa turned into lost beasts as soon as the door closed, and then just back to sweet just before the door opened again. That elevator has seen a lot of action, gay, straight, and other, but that couple was in the top 10. I have a home security system. I left for work one morning. I walked out my back door, got in my car, and pulled out of my driveway. The moment I left the driveway, a homeless would-be burglar came out from hiding on the side of my house and tried to open my back door. When he found it locked, he reluctantly wandered off after looking around for a bit. I never would have known if it weren't for the cameras. It makes you wonder what goes on without your knowledge. And I'd like to take a moment to advocate for home security systems. Please consider purchasing one. The ability to see what goes on around your home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is absolutely priceless. My camera system aids in investigation of at least 3 petty crimes in my neighborhood per year. Hit and runs, petty larceny, stuff like that. I mean, fair sentiment I guess if you have a full-blown house with a garden. Honestly, I'm not sure how easy it is to install one in a concrete apartment like mine, or that you'd catch much useful. Add to that the fact that I record from home and I'm more likely to just awkwardly walk into the criminals on my way to the kitchen, and it's one of those things that I'll likely put off for a while. I work for a security company. We install and monitor CCTV on construction sites. One night, about 2 a.m., our response officer gets a call from the monitoring system to say that there's a guy walking around one of the buildings under construction. They describe him as tall, dressed in all black with his hood up, but they couldn't see his face because he had his back to the camera. He wasn't stealing or vandalizing, just wandering around. It's usually homeless people looking for the shelter. So the response goes to investigate. When he gets there, there's nobody around, so he asks the station to check the camera covering the way in and out of the building to see which direction the guy went. But there's nothing. He does a full patrol of the site and there's no trace of anyone. The only other way for this guy to get out was to shimmy down some scaffolding, and he could be hurt, so the response officer asks the station to do a check on all of the camera footage through the night to see if there's any sign of him leaving. There's nothing. The next day, we ask the station to send over the stills from when they initially picked the intruder up. And he's not on any of them, just footage of our response officer walking around. We were pretty freaked out talking about it in the office, and it was laughed off as the monitoring officer being sleepy and seeing things. Except the cameras we have use infrared beams, and they only alert the monitoring station when somebody breaks those beams. I used to work doing part-time surveillance work for an art gallery. I went in horribly sick one day because I worked on a contract and I had to meet a quota for so many hours. Otherwise, I'd have to make it up elsewhere, which was borderline impossible for me because I only had free time on weekends when they were closed. So here I am with a fever and a trash can, dripping sweat and staring at these screens, when all of a sudden, on the lower gallery, I see this black, oozing mass creeping across the floor. It just kinda slithered across the brick, up the wall, pooled into a perfect circle in the middle of the room, and then it stood up into this weird, elongated shadow person with spindly arms and no eyes. It looked up at the camera, then very rapidly melted back into the floor and bolted towards the hallway that led to my desk. I screamed bloody murder, and then I threw up. Also, no, that thing wasn't really there. I was just way sicker than I thought. It was a fever hallucination. My boss came in and sent me home shortly after she came to see if I'd died, and I actually still use that weird gangly thing my brain came up with as a motif in some of my art. I'm a personal banker now, but at the time this story took place, I was an administrative assistant for a banking executive. The office I worked at was our regional headquarters, so there were a lot of different departments around. One such department was manned by a friend of mine who I would often take breaks with. One day I went into the basement and towards his cubicle where he was reviewing robbery footage of a local branch. This was around Halloween, and these crooks had watched way too much TV before coming up with their plan. If you know anything about bank robberies, there's hardly ever a takeover situation. These guys barged into the branch wearing Scream Halloween masks and capes. A customer stood up from the chair he was sitting in and got pistol whipped by one robber, while the other robber hopped the teller counter and pointed his piece at the teller. This poor teller was only on his second day and was still in training. He tried to open the drawer and it was locked. He didn't have the keys. He got pistol whipped too and fell to the ground. I don't remember exactly how much they got away with, but it wasn't much. Something about watching all of that take place in silence and in black and white on my friend's computer really creeped me out. They were caught a few hours later. They parked the getaway car right in front of their apartment and were counting money with the curtains open. Idiots. A man absolutely destroying his meat in the middle of an empty parking lot. I used to manage a retail swimming pool store, and we had a nice koi pond in the side yard. I chiefly cared for it, feeding the fish and cleaning out the leaves and filter and stuff, so I named all of the fish and grew to care about them. Then one day I was walking through the side yard to get to the back office when I noticed there were no fish in the pond. It's not a big pond, maybe a foot or two at its deepest and 7 feet long. It's not like they're all hiding. At first I thought somebody had hopped the fence and stolen the fish. Koi are expensive after all. So I reviewed the security footage from the night before to try and catch the cretin who did that, and at 6 a.m. I caught him. A giant heron with a 6-foot wingspan came down and helped himself to some lox for breakfast. Man, I felt sad. Luckily, one of the traumatized survivors appeared. He came out of some hiding hole in the wall. He was named Subway because he was about a foot long. We bought more fish to keep him company, and I made a rock cove covering over half the pond so that they could flee in case that damn heron came back. When I worked at Sears in high school, there was a theft in my department, and the LP team pulled us into their surveillance room to interview us. While they were asking me questions, I kept being distracted by all the monitors. Right above the guy asking me questions, I saw a small TV that had 16 smaller screens, and I realized the cameras were in the dressing rooms. I didn't see anyone in there at the time, and the guy interviewing me saw me looking. He turned to the console and turned that monitor off real quick. Super creepy, if you ask me. In short, Sears has cameras in their dressing rooms. What's the worst experience you've had with a toilet? Not me, but a friend of mine. A group of us all decided to go on a camping trip with our respective significant others. His girlfriend tells him she will not go unless they have a toilet, so he goes out and buys a portable, chemical toilet. He also buys a new tent for them to use and retire the old tent to be the bathroom. He sets the toilet up in town on the valley floor, fills up the fill tank with the blue chemical fluid. He tests it to make sure it works properly. The operation is simple. You pull a lever which opens a flap in the bottom of the toilet. The evidence is dropped through the flap, and a second valve drops fluid down the sides of the toilet into the open flap, flushing all remaining evidence into the lower tank. The flap then returns to its original position, creating a nice, airtight seal, preventing the contents of lower tank from disturbing your precious sensibilities. We drove all the way up to the top of the mountain and set up camp. We have a fun day of eating camp food, drinking beer, and having fun. It's now probably close to midnight and pitch black. My friend is the first one to need to use the new bathroom with the new 20th century chemical toilet. He excuses himself and proceeds to thoroughly test the storage capacity of the upper bowl. He pushes the lever to open the flap to the lower sealed tank, and immediately he gets a lesson on air pressure displacement, as the 7,000 or so feet higher elevation has resulted in a much higher pressure inside the waste tank than the air outside. There also appears to be a slurry of liquid and solid waste between escaping air and victim. What we hear around the campfire is a loud thwomp, followed by the friends screaming, "Oh God! Oh God! Oh crap! No!" Of course, being the good friends we are, we rush to his aid with him yelling, "Don't come in here! Don't come in here!" Many wet naps were used that night, a midnight creek river bath, and years of teasing came from that night. That was the last camping trip for that tent. It was retired. The toilet, however, still is used, but the reason for the little screw valve on the side was learned by all. In conclusion, pressure difference in camping toilet became crap fountain. I wonder if, on deliberation, his partner would have just preferred crapping in the woods like the other campers do. I've never used one of these devices, and now I'm not sure I ever would. Was at Target one day, shopping for groceries and whatnot. I then got that feeling, you know, when you've got to take a dump. I rushed to the nearest bathroom and unleashed the beast. Mind you, this Target only had one bathroom, and it was a bathroom where only one person could be there at a time. I thought it would be a quick crap, but it turned out I was wrong, and it would not stop coming out. This goes on for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I hear knocking on the door. It was a lady that said, "My son really has to use the bathroom. Would you please hurry up?" I couldn't really respond to her because of all the pain I was feeling, so I basically moaned and grunted at her. After about 3 minutes, I hear a kid screaming, "Mommy!" and I could probably tell it was the mother's son. Hearing this, I knew I needed to hurry up, so I forced myself to squeeze out the extremities faster. As soon as it's done, I whip fast as possible. The worst part is that when I tried to flush the toilet, it clogged. So about 3/4 of the toilet bowl is filled with crap, pee, and toilet paper. Scared, I wash my hands and make a run for the door, then to my car. When I exit the bathroom, I notice a little boy crying and his mum saying things like, "Frick, damn, crap," etc. Turns out the kid crapped himself because I was taking such a long time. It was awkward when I was walking back to my car, since the woman's car was right next to mine and she was carrying him to the car so the kid could go home and change. In conclusion, made a kid crap himself after taking a humongous crap myself. Here you go, my worst toilet experience. I have issues. I'm painfully shy, very nervous of things a lot of the time, and I get highly anxious about some things, particularly going to the loo. I find it really awkward to go to the bathroom in an unfamiliar house, even more so with unfamiliar people. When I was at university, I was the only girl living in a house with a group of boys. I was quite nervous about crapping. I mean, males tend to have a kind of idea of females that they don't do crap or something, and that they think that when they do, it's pink and pebble-like. Anyhow, one evening I went to the toilet, didn't put the light on, and the pull cord for the light was outside the bathroom. So I made the decision on my way that I wouldn't use the light. It was early evening in autumn, so it was light-ish. I could see, but it was dim and shadowy. I only had to pee, so it wasn't a huge problem. Only it was a problem because then I ended up pooing. I was supposed to be going food shopping with one of my housemates, and here I was pooing. I was getting a little anxious that he was waiting downstairs, and the time I was taking would be a firm indicator that I was more than peeing. I quickly finished up and was about to leave the bathroom when I thought to myself that I should maybe double-check the toilet was clean before I left. Having no light meant it was very hard to see if there were any stains. I used my phone to light up the toilet and saw the biggest poo ever. Seriously, it was taking up half the toilet and was wedged into the U-bend. I panicked. I flushed, but it didn't move. Didn't budge. Now I was getting really flustered. Downstairs, housemates would have definitely heard a double flush. It still hadn't gone. I couldn't risk a third flush. A third flush would be far more humiliating than dealing with it using an alternate method. At least I thought so. Not sure how I convinced myself of that, but in blind panic and toilet embarrassment, I did. I convinced myself that I had no other option but to lift it out. I did not tell myself to wrap my hand in toilet paper. In went the hand. I got a firm grip on the log, and Sue learned that there is no gripping a poo. It can't be done. It began to disintegrate in my hand. But I managed to sort of flip it into the sink where it landed in 2 chunks with a wet thud slap and left opaque brown stains all over the sink. Here I will add that I definitely should have just broken it up and flushed it, but I was panicking so bad. I could feel my heart pumping and I was sweating and my breathing was stalling. My whole body was shaking and felt like jelly. It was like a negative adrenaline. So what do you do when you have a sink covered in crap stains and 2 huge chunks of crap sat there waiting to be disposed of? You mash it down the sink. You run the tap until the water is scalding hot and you proceed to mash the poo into the plug hole as it disintegrates. Only it blocks the plug hole. Now the sink is filling up, and you have a crap plug in the bottom of the sink of burning water, and you have to unblock it. So you shove your hand in, burning yourself while you're trying like crazy to scoop the crap out of the little plug holes. All the while, you hear your housemate shouting up the stairs, "Hey, Susie, are you okay? Are you ready to go?" Oh crap, literally. Suddenly the panic reaches a new level. The housemate is coming up the stairs, the door to your crap sauna is at the top of those very stairs, and you know that the steam in this room is the most foul-smelling steam that could ever be, and soon it will have leaked under the door to the top of the stairs he's walking up. You grab bleach, soap, shampoo, shower gel, and start squirting it under the hot tap, trying like hell to make normal-smelling steam. I'm in the shower. I thought I'd need a shower. It might save time. What the frick was that excuse? Anyhow, the steam is now pooey and perfumed and sickening. The poo is almost mashed away, but the last few bits are not leaving. If you've never manhandled crap, it has a texture like no other. It feels a bit like when you start kneading bread just after adding the warm water and it's warm and sticky. Maybe it's seeded bread. There's definitely a slight coarseness to crap. Mainly, it's the stickiness that is a hassle. And the smell. Obviously, it sticks like melted chocolate and dough combined into a sticky, thick nightmare. You force the last few nuggets down the sink and start trying to wash your hands. The smell will not leave. Will not budge. After 10 minutes of scrubbing and soaping and crying and sitting because your legs will no longer support you, you decide to do the walk of shame. Exit the bathroom, tell your housemate that you were sick in the shower and it took some cleaning up. Remember suddenly, thanks to Beethoven, that tomato juice gets rid of skunk smell and wonder if it will get rid of poo smell. Set off to the supermarket in new hope of getting rid of the smell. The biggest oh crap came in the toilet roll aisle when my housemate says, "Oh, this reminds me, I did the biggest crap ever earlier. It wouldn't flush, I just had to leave it." It wasn't even my own crap. I'd known this guy for 3 weeks and had already gotten up to my elbows in his crap, all because it felt weird pooing in an unfamiliar environment. That flatmate's gonna try and take a dump at least 3 times before he leaves the house from now on. Yep, this incident will scar her for life. He will constantly go to the bathroom before he does anything, really. Holy crap, I must have been that kid. I thought this would be a funny topic to do, and it very much is. However, it's also making me pause to gag intermittently, so a mixed bag in summary. A mixed bag of poo, pee, and my spew. Here's another one. I was pooping in a train toilet. I thought it was locked. My country's train toilets use electronical locks. You push a button and it's supposed to be locked. But it wasn't. Some young good-looking lady walked right in. I was confused and didn't know what to say. 1, because I was crapping, and 2, because she was a fine-looking woman. So what came from my mouth joyfully was, "Tickets, please!" And then the door closed automatically. I have Hirschsprung's disease, which basically means I was born without the muscles that move poop through the intestines. Basically, when I have to poop, there's no holding it in for a while. I have maybe 5 minutes before I crap myself. So I have many, many poop stories. My favorite happened when I was about 10. I went over to a friend's house, whose mother was a teacher at the school we went to, for the night. Since she's a girl and I'm a boy, we couldn't sleep in the same room, so I had to sleep in her older brother's room, who was about 16. Right before it was time for bed, my friend's mum said not to use the bathroom in the brother's room. I definitely didn't hear this, probably because we were playing Legos or something. Anyway, about 2 a.m. I feel the need and rush to the closest bathroom, her brother's bathroom. I left the beefiest, runny crap I have ever crapped in that poor, poor toilet. There's 3 funny parts to this story. First, there was no water in the bowl. Crap, there was no water in the whole bathroom. Second, everyone knew not to use that bathroom, the door was always shut, so the smell slipped under the nasal radar for like 3 days, and the contents of the bowl hardened into poop steel. Lastly, her mum asked me at school if I knew anything about them needing to replace a certain toilet in a certain forbidden bathroom. That's amazing. I worked in a display suite for new apartments. The toilets were always dry. One Saturday morning, we opened up the display to the most foul stench I've ever smelled. It was the middle of summer, and the display suite was all glass with a tin roof so it heated up like a sauna. Trying to find the source of the smell, we realized that someone had crapped in the display toilet last weekend, despite there being no toilet paper or water in the toilet, and being too embarrassed or inconsiderate to tell anybody. So for a week in the middle of Australian summer, this turd sat there festering. It was rancid. The worst part was, because it was in a working environment, it was a biohazard. The company I worked for was too cheap to professionally deal with the issue, so the cleaners tried to vacuum it out, blowing hot poo air out the back of the vacuum, only making the smell worse. It took weeks to get out, and now we seal the toilets shut. Typically, I won't drop a deuce anywhere but my own house, but one time I was at my new girlfriend's house and the situation was dire. I was getting sweaty fighting it. My stomach was making the sound that there were radioactive gases brewing, and I knew I didn't have time to get all the way home. So instead, thinking that I have the bowels of a normal person, I went to the bathroom and destroyed that toilet. Even with the fan on, I'm positive she heard it as if I recorded it for her on my phone. Finally, it was over. I flush and it clogs. I spent a total of 45 minutes in there between the act and the post-war toilet maintenance, and lost any smooth points I had with her for the next several months. In conclusion, pooped in my girlfriend's house and went from knight in shining armor to the poopsmith in 45 minutes. So, what happened with you guys? I reckon it all went down the toilet from there. One time when I was little, I wanted to know what it would be like to be blind, so I blindfolded myself. When it was time to pee, I couldn't see the toilet and accidentally peed on the lid and started crying. Not sure if it was my worst or my best. I was peeing when a big sneeze hit me, which made me fart, which for some reason was followed immediately by a burp, which made me snort in laughter, which gave me the hiccups. You deserve an award for that. Is that what number 3 is? Burp snort. I once farted at the exact same time someone texted me. My phone was in my front pocket and set to vibrate. For a split second, I thought I'd farted so hard it was coming out front and back. I was walking into a stall in a subway, as in the underground transportation system, when I slipped in a puddle of pee and stuck my right arm into a pile of unflushed crap in the toilet in front of me, soaking my knees in pee, covering my hand above the wrist in the worst case of the runs I've ever seen, and badly spraining a couple of fingers when they caught on the edge of the toilet when I was catching myself. Then I spewed. I was at my girlfriend's house for the second time and things were still rather tense. I got a terrible stomachache during dinner and had to use the bathroom immediately. The layout of their house was in a way that the bathroom was next to the dining room. Not wanting to make much embarrassing noise, I wisely created a nest of toilet paper on the ground to later transfer the poo into the toilet. Squatting down, I began crapping, lost my balance, fell, hit my head on the counter, and fell unconscious. I was found in a mess of crap when I came to. I feel like this is an unfinished story. What happened when you came to? Not only will this technique prevent splashback, but it will muffle the sound. For our viewers' convenience, the narrator has followed the link provided by that previous commenter. The technique is apparently laying a single piece of toilet paper on the surface of the water, which does wonders for preventing splash and, by extension, UTIs. Academic hall bathroom, senior year of college. Went to take a crap during class. Did not look at the roll beforehand. Go to wipe, no paper. By myself in the bathroom, so I do that sort of haven't wiped my butt crab walk to check out the other stall. No toilet paper in there either. Go to the paper towel dispenser. No paper. Ended up using a handful of gum wrappers I had in my pocket to get enough to walk downstairs to the other bathroom and finish the job. I still have nightmares. Okay, so when I was in the first grade, I went to this hardcore Christian school in Florida, USA. So one day, my class went on a field trip to the library or something along those lines. I just remember them leaving the classroom for about half an hour or so. Anyway, I wasn't allowed to come because the week before I had tied my shoes together in the library, so I got kicked out. So here I am, first grader, alone in the classroom when I feel grumbly in my tumbly. I figure that I have to wait until my teacher gets back before I'm allowed to go to the bathroom, so I patiently wait as the poop pains get more and more intense. Eventually, I am in the corner curled into a ball squeezing my butt cheeks with the force of 1,000 gods. I hear my teacher from down the hall, and as I jump into the air with relief, I crap myself. I straight up crap myself as my entire class enters the classroom. So then, first grader me tries to play it off like nothing's going on, and I sit in my seat and proceed to learn. I'm an idiot. I'd freaking crapped myself. The teacher pulls me out and tells me that the entire class can smell my crap-filled drawers and sends me to the nurse's office while I'm forced to sit on a toilet until my parents can come. I ended up sitting on that toilet with crap covering my legs and crying for about 2 hours. When my parents finally arrived, I had hives covering my legs from that god-forsaken toilet. In conclusion, crapped myself in the first grade, had to sit on the toilet for 2+ hours with crap covering legs, and breaking out in hives. In an Indian restaurant, I went for a pee, and while I was sitting there, I noticed that a few of the tiles were blown, as in they'd come away from the wall. So in my slightly drunken state, I thought, I'll give them a prod. So I did. At that point, a vast quantity of tiles fell off the wall, causing a very loud crash. Everyone in the restaurant heard it. I had to walk back to my table with everyone, including the servers, looking at me. I never went back. When I was in high school, somebody in my family forgot to flush after going number 2. At some point, my dog discovered this and proceeded to treat herself to a snack. I went upstairs after I caught a hint of a very foul smell to find the contents of the toilet dragged across the hallway carpet. My mum and I spent the rest of the night cleaning it. The worst part was how sick my dog got. She spent the next few days vomiting up foamy, brown spew that reeked like you wouldn't believe. Mine would probably be having a violent period the morning after a night out whilst staying with my then-girlfriend in her dorm room, conducted in her ensuite bathroom with little to no sound insulation. I'd snuck out of bed around 6 a.m., praying to every available deity to leave her peacefully sleeping while I experienced my furious bowel vacation. Regrettably, this was not to be. As soon as I sat on the unfortunate porcelain throne, I unleashed a torrent of gas and liquid not usually experienced outside of volcanic eruptions. This was the pyroclastic flow of crapping. The noise was inescapable, and any attempt to control it just resulted in greater volume, except furnished with an embarrassingly puckered nuance. After the storm, I carefully opened the door, once again silently praying that my girlfriend would be clearly asleep, blissfully oblivious to the tarnation I'd just inflicted to her bathroom. Instead, I saw her shaking with laughter under the covers. Possibly not the worst experience one can have with a toilet, as Elvis would no doubt attest, but it was extremely embarrassing. I was on holiday in Florida with my girlfriend, now ex, and her family. Went to the toilet in the hotel room when we got there. Crap was too big to go down the crappy American toilet. Blocked and then proceeded to overflow after I attempted a double flush. Janitor was called, and the look he gave me when he left the bathroom was akin to a Vietnam flashback. In addition to this, the water leaked downstairs into the lobby. In conclusion, took a crap, blocked a toilet, traumatized a janitor, and flooded the lobby. American toilet? In case you didn't realize, Americans are done with taking Europe's crap. One of my good friends earned the nickname Iceberg by doing just this. Be proud of that crap. Clogging someone else's toilet is almost a rite of passage. It's like being a dog who pees on a fire hydrant to claim their territory. It's your toilet, your grounds now. The best part? You clog up the toilet, they fix it for you. First step in dominating your friends and becoming the alpha. When I was about 8, I accidentally zipped the outer skin of my pee-pee up in my zipper. My mum had to come and unzip me, which was not awesome. Things got pretty mangled up, so we're driving to the hospital, and my mum is yelling at my dad, "I told you we should have circumcised him." My dad is yelling at me for being such an idiot, and I'm just bawling my eyes out in the back seat. Good times. I ended up having to get circumcised because the doctor was worried that it would heal up with scar tissue that would cause problems down the line. On the plus side, I got a week off school. At my then girlfriend's house, and I've got to pee. Excuse myself to take a leak, and I find myself fighting two streams. My pee hole was semi-blocked from my self-pleasure activities conducted a few hours previous. Is there a name for this? Typically, the blockage is only temporary, but on this occasion the two-streamed dragon did not waver. One stream hit the water as the second sprayed the seat, wall, and floor. In hindsight, I should have remedied the trouble by simply squatting lower. In my panic, I used the only available tool I had, my hand, to bank stream 2 back into the bowl. I spent the next 10 minutes cleaning a good amount of pee off the floor and walls. Definitely the time I got locked inside a bathroom stall in the middle of Moscow. I closed and locked the stall door behind me and commenced my business. A lot of vodka the night before was doing a number on me, and I thought about my girlfriend sitting outside wondering what was going on. A few minutes passed, and when I tried to exit, I immediately saw the latch was broken. Completely broken. It wouldn't engage at all. That's when I noticed the claw marks around it. It was half broken and there were pry marks too. Clearly, I was not this toilet's first victim. I panicked and started banging really hard. This was one of those stalls that goes all the way to the floor, so I wasn't crawling out. After a few minutes, I was wedging myself against the back wall and trying to kick it out. I was in full-blown panic mode now. Stuck in a foreign country, I speak a little Russian, but my teacher never taught me, "Help me, I'm stuck in the toilet." The Russian word for help is all I could muster up. After 10 minutes, I began to lose hope. This was deep inside the mall and there was no cell signal on my mobile, so I couldn't even embarrassingly text my girlfriend. After sitting back down and collecting myself, I decided to try and crawl out of the 6-inch space at the top. I shoved my huge winter coat and all my shopping bags one by one over the top of the stall. Then I began to try and scale the wall tile. These were high ceilings. I fell a few times and I heard a lot of Russian men murmuring. I figured all my purchases would be gone. Eventually I squeezed over the top and fell 8 feet down on my butt to a lot of stairs. Then I had to explain why I was in the bathroom for 30 minutes. She didn't even believe me when I told her this story.
What screams "I peaked in high school"? Getting the score of the football game you won against the school's rival tattooed on your shoulder. When I was in high school, this guy a year before me had a fearsome reputation. At house parties, people would fear him just by name alone. He would show up to parties with his cronies and start fights. He came from a decent enough family. Everybody wanted to be on his good side. Anyway, he graduates high school, and most of us were still in 12th grade. I remember he used to come around lunchtime to smoke with the people out front, shoot the breeze, and talk about how much fun it is to sleep in and do nothing and have all this freedom. A couple of months of, "Oh, cool," to, "Why are you still here?" as we awkwardly shuffled back to class. Some of the popular kids from high school still get together very frequently, and you see updates of it on Facebook. I also keep touch with some friends from high school, and I think that that's nice. However, one of those friends of mine once ran into them during one of their get-togethers. He said hi and happened to be sitting not too far from them at the bar. He said that all they did for the whole night was talk about high school. They looked up old classmates on Facebook, laughed at them, called them names, looked at their spouses, and called them names too. They still thought themselves the popular kids, as if they still had some sort of influence on all these people. Everyone has moved on, done interesting things in their life except for them. They're just rehashing old drama and old rumors. One of those girls had a small bit of success as a photographer in high school. She won a couple contests that were aimed at teenagers, and her photos weren't bad. Her parents turned this into a very big deal. Her friends all wanted to be in her photos, and she was dead set on going to art school and getting the recognition she deserved. I don't know if she ever made it into art school or if she dropped out, but she definitely did not become a photographer. Instead, you see her launching some new startup business selling asinine live, laugh, love crap about once a year. I dated a guy with this high school mascot tattooed on his arm. It was such a turnoff. A guy who graduated from my high school back in 2003 was arrested a few years ago for his second DUI. He was wearing his Letterman jacket in his mugshot. At my 10-year reunion, the prom queen came wearing a tiara with a custom Queen 03 sash over her shoulder. I had to go outside, I was laughing so hard. But I'll be danged if she didn't rock that outfit the whole time, so respect. Still sad though. We used to play indoor floor hockey in a loft room in the big gym of my middle school. One game, I scored 3 goals, one of them being a bank shot off the wall. The next year, I wrote about the game for an assignment in English class, and the teacher read it to the class the next day. I'm not sure which one was my peak. Still bullying the nerds at your 10-year reunion. Dropping out of college to promote your pyramid scheme. As someone who recently graduated, the students who returned to the school every time they came home from school just so people would pay attention to them. Also, not sure how to explain it, but the people who now post blank screens and just text on their Snapchat stories that just say things like, always crazy to see who you can really trust when XYZ happens, or surprising to see who really cares about you when you need friends the most. Like I said, I don't know how to explain it, but there's definitely a correlation. I taught at a high school in the US for exactly 1 year. During that year, some guy who had graduated a year or so prior came back to visit about 3 or 4 times. This douche just rolled into the school and would pop into classes to say hi to teachers and students in the middle of lessons. I have no idea why, but for some reason, he was walking around barefoot too. He tried that crap in my class, and I asked him promptly to leave, to which he said to me, "Oh, you're new here, and don't understand that I'm sort of a legend around here, so people like to see me come by." Yeah, I kicked, quote, "the legend" the heck out, and promptly advised my students to move on with their lives after they were finished with high school. I knew a girl in college who tried to do the same crap as the other guy I just mentioned, but her old school wouldn't allow her and her friends to even enter the building. She was really mad about it and commented, "How could they do that? We ran that school." That was the saddest thing I'd ever heard someone say. Sharing every memory from Facebook talking about the good old days and wish we could go back when it's only been a few years since graduation. Filming yourself running drills and throwing footballs off camera in front of your van/mobile home. Selling pot to teenagers and then trying to get them to stay and smoke with you. How do you do, fellow kids? Do you also smoke the marijuana? Want to earn money from home and set your own hours? Edit, thank you for the love, and sorry you all have had that, quote, bestie, read, distant acquaintance, reach out to you with a desperate sales pitch. "Hey hun, long time no see. I know I bullied the crap out of you in high school, but we're past that now, right? Now, want to buy some terrible overpriced supplements/makeup/essential oils from me? Hashtag boss babe, hashtag be your own boss, hashtag killing it." The class that graduated before me had their 10-year reunion last year, and apparently a big fight broke out over something that happened when they were all still in high school. I guess that's one way to tell if someone peaked in high school. Pretty embarrassing. When I was in high school, the cool kids partied hard. They'd get blackout drunk and used whatever illegal substances they can get. I was looking through some of the profiles of some of those classmates, and a few of them are still doing the same crap. Talking gangsta stuff despite growing up in a middle-class suburb, talking about how they miss their kids who are in CPS custody because they went to jail for using, going on rants about narcs, etc. They're about 27 or 28. What made you cool in high school makes you a loser as a grown adult, especially when you're a parent. Teachers who suck up to the athletes and other popular kids and ignore the less popular kids. Hope you're enjoying the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you like Am I the Genius, you'll probably love Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. I went to school with a girl whose parents graduated from our high school 20 years prior. All 4 members of their family got the school's logo tattooed. Her boyfriend still goes to the football games and reposts his game highlights on Instagram. We're all 21 to 22. I'm from New Mexico and live in the largest city in the state. We've never had a good high school football team, and the BF usually goes to pick up underage girls and brags to everyone about how he was the star football player. If someone from another team makes a really good play, he'll make some kind of remark about how he could have done it better, or he'll go into a detail about his junior varsity football experience. Making any mention of SAT or ACT scores. Bonus points for that IQ test you took when you were a kid online. Man, I remember how much our high school used to stress about ACT scores. It was like putting all your eggs in one basket. They painted this picture of not being able to get into college if you had anything lower than like a 28 or something. And a small rant here, I hate how much of high school was just learning how to take tests. I never absorbed any of the information on the ACT categories, which were math, science, reading, and English. some of those science graphs would have been genuinely interesting if I weren't under the pressure of taking a test. The ACT and all the prep work boils down to, how do I take this test as efficiently as possible with the time I have? And they wonder why we suck at college. I was in the National Honor Society, so I know a little bit about leadership anytime after high school. Still wearing your Letterman jacket and class ring in your 30s. Talking about high school sports games from a different decade as if they meant something. Still living in your hometown and looking forward to that night at the bar just before Thanksgiving when everyone who left comes home, so you can talk about high school stuff to people who have grown up and have real lives now. I have a good one for this. My cousin once dragged me out to a local bar that I don't particularly care for due to its reputation. But I was going through a separation and figured I could use a night out. A guy comes up to me, clearly already drunk, and belligerently declares, "I've never seen you in here before." I replied, "That's because I've never been in here before." "Well, I'm just saying, I've never seen you here before." "Okay." "I'm John. I used to play football at the school up the road. You know, the school just up the road, up on the hill." "Yes, I know the school. I went to the same school." "Yeah? I played football there." "Good for you." "I don't remember you from school." "I don't imagine you do." "Well, I'm just saying, I played football there and I don't remember you." Finally, he walked away. More like stumbled away. This was back in around 2013. I graduated in 2004. He was 1 or 2 years ahead of me. So it had been over a decade since he graduated, and he was using his high school football to hit on chicks at the bar. He moved on to hit on my cousin, so I pretended to be her lesbian lover to chase him off. She thanked me for it. Guy is a total tool and always was. Edit, I seem to be catching a little flack from a few people for being, quote, rude myself. I left a portion of the conversation out to avoid being too long-winded. I did ask him if he remembered a secretary at the school, and he started trash-talking her. I told him she was my mother. He paused, at least he stopped trash-talking mom, and then cycled back to not remembering me belligerently. To add a bit more context, I remembered him from school from a different belligerent encounter. He randomly said to me one day, "You're like some kind of pothead, right?" I said no and asked why he thought that. He explained that I hung out with a few known potheads. I did, and that must mean I was a pothead too. So I explained that they were just my friends, and just because they smoked didn't mean I had to do it too, and that I didn't, which was the truth. He repeated the notion that I must be because of who I hung out with, so I explained again that I didn't. He finally dropped the subject. This dude has always been belligerent, douchey, repetitive, and incapable of carrying a conversation. Hope this info and context clarifies things. My friends used to get together to play Halo, the old 4-person split-screen multiplayer, and they'd destroy me every time. Now, we've all moved away, and we play shooters together online occasionally. I win almost every time now that they can't see my screen. Those suckers screen peaked in high school. I'm mad. I'm mad about this pun. Dying before graduation. Yeah, okay. That mean you peak in high school by default, huh? A guy graduated 2 years before me, in 2006. He got a job as a school narc my senior year. Basically, a job that is somewhere below security and barely a step above student. We had our 10-year reunion last year in the school gymnasium, and there he was, with the sunglasses on at 8 p.m., sporting a sweet Flavor Saver and Dickie shorts, with his black socks pulled up to his knees. As was the fashion for all the bros at my high school when we attended. He was making the rounds, trying to enforce every single rule that was imposed on students. Meanwhile, we are all 27 to 29 years old and nobody is taking his crap. Eventually, someone told him, "You were a tool in high school. Nothing has changed. Get lost, narc." He then started listing every girl he, quote, boned in high school. It was hard watching that guy spiral so hard while everyone was laughing at him. Edit. A Flavor Saver is a nickname we gave for the patch of hair that grows directly under your bottom lip. It's a flavor saver because when you go down on a woman, the juice gets in there and can taste it later. I hated reading that. It's just a joke we'd say because it was very popular amongst the bro crowd in high school. Basically, a guy who tries way too hard. Because they couldn't grow beards or mustaches but could attain one of those. I have a friend. We'll call him Dave. That isn't his name because his family is Iranian, but we'll call him Dave. I also went to school with another person who I'll call Jerkhead, because he's a jerkhead. He refused to be called by his actual name anyway, and insisted on being called by his nickname, which for the purposes of this tale, we shall call Massive Wanker. Dave applied for a job and got it. It was a pretty serious gig, a finance job that paid extremely well. He got it and arrived for his first day. The guy who hired him showed him around the building, then showed him to his desk and introduced him to his immediate manager. It was Jerkhead. This was literally about 15 years after we'd left school, and everyone who wasn't a follow Jerkhead thought Jerkhead was far in the past. Nope. Dave said, "Oh, hi Jerkhead." Jerkhead replied, it's actually Massive Wanker if you don't mind." Dave said, "What, still?" He then went down to the lobby and paced around for 10 minutes and then just walked out. Nobody wants Jerkhead to be their boss. Dave now works elsewhere and seems happy. Jerkhead, however, no idea. Don't care. Why? Because he's a proper freaking jerkhead. A football coach at my high school held a record as a linebacker for when he was in high school in the 80s. One kid a few years ago on the first string varsity team came 30 yards away from breaking that record, and the coach promptly took him out of the game and kept him for the rest of the season. Only one game left at that point, so no one could break his record from 30 years ago. One of the few good things, maybe the only good thing, about the UK's usually screwed education system is that hardly anyone, except those who have had an expensive private education, gives a crap about their old school. No loyalty to the old school. Sports loyalty when at school was practically non-existent. No one, apart from those on the teams, usually gave a single crap about how the sports teams did. No yearbooks, no jackets, no proms. At least when I went to school, the aberration seems to be creeping in now. No one gives a crap. School reunions are rare if a thing at all here. I still know and see a few of my classmates or ones who were at school when I was there, but only because they still live locally and it's not that big a place. The others, I have no idea where they are, how they are, even if they're still alive, and with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, have no great wish to find out. Still drinking in the same pub you drank in as a student, because that's now full of students. So you're that guy or girl who never left home and drinks with school kids much younger than you. Never advancing your life past the moment when you graduate. I have a cousin who still lives with his parents, has had the same job he had since junior year, and has done nothing else with his life. Alternatively, I have a cousin the same age still living with his mom, but he's going to college and taking care of his grandmother. I think he wants to make it big as a concept artist, but he's working on a fallback degree before he makes the big leap. Huge difference. See, living with parents isn't a bad thing. America is kinda unique in how it treats that, because you'll find that in a lot of European and Asian countries, people will stay with their parents into like their 30s, and even start their own new families to stay, rather than just saying, "You're 18 now, screw off and have fun." That being said, people in those situations are the second scenario, because they're still trying to support themselves and take care of family. Really aggressive sport parents. I stayed at the same hotel as a Little League team, and there wasn't a single parent that I didn't despise. Your only friends are from high school. You tell your college grad older brother, yes, you got a math-heavy degree, but in high school I took Algebra 2 and you took geometry like everyone else looking for the easy path. Says to older brother, everyone looked down on you in high school. Gets ticked when older brother says, you are 38, you graduated 20 years ago, please tell me you have something to be proud of from the past 2 decades. That's oddly specific, dude. You want to talk about it? Are you projecting a little bit there, bud? You need to talk to someone about that? Want to see my prom pictures? I used to be so fit back in high school. You should have seen me play ball back in the day. I probably could have gone to play college. Want to see my highlight reel? I had a guy every other week when I was a teenager. Look how skinny I was back then. I was cheer captain of my high school. I made sure people feared me when I walked the halls. It's like, okay, we get it. You were popular and feared. We're nearly 30 now. Get over yourself. I work in HR and once had a resume that mentioned the applicant had been the captain of the local high school football team. He was in his 50s at the time he submitted this application. In the wise words of my bowels after I have Taco Bell, sometimes you just gotta let that crap go. I did some work at a guy's house when I was about 20 when I was on summer break from college. I was doing some landscaping and such. This guy was a cop, about 35, and was married with a pretty nice house. I would work there, and he would pop over to the house once or twice a day for lunch or whatever, and would check on how the work was going. But one day, he tells me to come to the garage with him. He is searching around the garage for something, but won't tell me what. Finally, he finds a box with his old homecoming crown from high school when he was named Homecoming King. He started talking about how high school was such great memories and all that. He was trying to show off and thought I'd be really impressed, but I was really embarrassed for him, to be honest. My mom, a 42-year-old, has a giant stack of numbers that boys gave her in high school. She brings them out to brag every now and then. It's embarrassing. A Slipknot tattoo, an older model Honda Civic, and an assistant manager job at Pizza Hut. The Civic has nothing to do with this, and you will leave that poor little well-built car alone. A high school teacher who berates a student, me, for deciding not to go to prom. You're going to regret it for the rest of your life. I see why you became a high school psychology teacher. I'm late to the party, but a former coworker of mine, who just turned 45 years old, posts pictures and messages about him and his brother breaking track records in high school. Sometimes it's a picture of almost 30-year-old newspaper clippings, other times it's trophies, or maybe it's a nostalgic message of wanting to go back in time to high school and being the greatest again. He also likes to mention one of his records is still unbroken. I wished he had cared about his job performance as much as his track and field record. My time working with him would have been much less stressful. Loud mufflers and revving your engines on residential streets. I live in the South, so every single Ford F-150 I see driving in my town? Gather round, kids. This one is freaking weird. About 10 years ago, I briefly toyed with the idea of moving from New Jersey back to my crappy town in Pennsylvania. My job sucked. I needed a change of scenery, and there was this really good opportunity, surprisingly, back in that crappy town. We're talking $10K more in pay, cheaper living, closer to family, and what few friends I had left from high school. This, I should note, was when I still had my high school on my resume. I show up for the interview, and the hiring manager has a shrine to our high school in his office. Football jersey bearing his name is framed and hanging above his desk. He has pencil cups with the school crest on it. He has mugs bearing the school name. The first thing that jumps out at me is, where did you get all this crap? We didn't have a bookstore. I have no idea how you would acquire a high school mug or a pencil cup. Yet, there they were. This guy was elated when I sat down and began talking about high school, asking me if certain teachers he had were still there when I went. He had about 25 years on me. Some of them were, as they were fresh out of college when he was in high school. After about a half hour, I ask him if he has any questions about, my experience or skills. He waves his hand and says, "Nah man, don't worry about it. You can handle this job." Sends me to get fingerprinted for the background check and tells me he'll call in 2 to 3 weeks once the background check is done with my start date. 3 weeks pass, no contact. He isn't responding to my calls. Finally, I catch him on the phone and he's apologetic. Surely I would understand, however, that he simply had to hire the guy who came in after me. He hired some kid who had gone to the same high school but actually played football. The job required a bachelor's degree, quote, or equivalent. Kid had just been kicked out of college, it was in the papers. For an inappropriate assault, he was able to plead down to a misdemeanor. The hiring manager, in yet a new level of unprofessionalism, is telling me all about this, but adding that even though he doesn't have his degree, he has 3 years of college plus all that leadership experience from playing football, so it's equivalent. But hey, no hard feelings, dude. I should add that this guy went to Penn State. He also had a law degree from Temple. I only knew this because of his LinkedIn. He had no diplomas or college swag in his office. Now, I'm all about being proud of your alma mater if that sort of thing matters to you. It just boggles my mind that the last time this guy felt so proud was freaking high school football. Not when he graduated from one of the most well-known, thanks to football, sort of, state schools around. Not when he earned a law degree from a respected Philadelphia law school. Nope. This guy's proudest achievement was playing on the football team of a small Catholic high school that won a championship 2 times in the 45 years that it was open. Honestly, I feel like I dodged a bullet. I don't think I could have taken talking about high school every day. Found a better job anyway, and never went back to that town even for a visit. Hey, psst, over here. What black market do kids at your school run? I used to deal in whiteboard markers for teachers in high school. One teacher had a tendency to hoard them, leaving none for other teachers. I would take markers from him and provide them to other teachers in need. While there was no formal payment, I was given a little bit more leniency at times, e.g., request to leave the classroom for a moment. Once the marker would start squealing on the whiteboard because it was almost empty, I'd get teachers giving me a nod as if to say, "You got the goods?" I'd then supply them with the marker color of their choosing, usually black. It was actually a lot of fun, and I never heard teachers talk about my systems or chastise me for taking markers. I was in elementary school when Pogs were big. Everyone had cool slammers and stuff, but I didn't have money for good ones. My dad made one out of half-inch mild steel for me and used an engraving pen to make a simple pattern. Everyone was asking me where I got them from. I didn't want to lose my unfair edge, but I also knew I could make money. My dad had a big sheet of this half-inch steel. I told them I was the only one who could get them. I sold them for $15 a pop. My dad kept 10, I got 5. And that's when I learned what overhead was. I went to a private high school with a strict dress code, ties, belt, etc. So, I bought a bunch of ties and belts from a thrift store and ran a lucrative rental business out of my locker. Locker accessories such as carpets and magnets. Carpets? In a locker? Do you mean like floor mats? Or small rugs? I didn't know there were schools with walk-in lockers. Used to crush up warheads and mix them with sugar. Sold them by the straw with the ends melted. 50 cents a piece. I don't know if this counts, but me and my brother would take money to beat all the challenges in GoldenEye 007 for N64, so people got all the cheats. The invincibility challenge was the toughest. I used to sell Coke, the drink, because they didn't allow fizzy drinks to be brought in. Authorities have reported that a young student was identified selling Coke in a middle school. Hold on, I'm getting reports that it is, in fact, Coca-Cola and not the other thing. There goes that story. I have family in New York and would go to visit a couple of times a year back in high school. Every once in a while, we'd visit Chinatown in New York City, and I'd end up buying hundreds of dollars worth of fake watches, Rolex, Tag, Gucci, etc., return to school, and sell them for double than what I paid for them. Pokemon cards we would hide under playground equipment and trade them because the teachers would take them if they saw them. So we always set up deals in class and created a whole Pokemon card trading network. My school used the metallic ends of pencils as a currency. Bronze was rarest, so it was the most expensive. Green was most common, so it was the least. We traded for erasers or pencil cases or a spot up in the 4-square line. Eventually got banned, but we still operated with people acting as banks to keep the currency hidden and to keep transactions hidden. At my school, they took all the sweets out of the vending machines and replaced them with healthy snacks. In the local town, there was a sweet shop where you could buy a kilo of mixed sweets for £5. So every week I would go there and buy 1 pound of small paper bags and spend the Sunday night before school repackaging them all ready for the week ahead. Come Monday, I would go into the school and load up my bag up every day selling the bags for 50 pence. Cuban sandwiches straight out of a duffel bag before school. They were bomb, cheap, and way better than the lunch in the cafeteria. Oh my god, no, you guys have got to check out this movie called Chef. It has Jon Favreau and John Leguizamo in it, and among the incredible dishes shown in the movie, cubanos are part of it. It's a sandwich made with marinated pork, ham, cheese, and pickles, all in between pan cubano, a specific type of sandwich bread. It gets pressed on a plancha, and it looks so good. I know I talk about food way too much on this channel, but you all have to watch it or try it yourself. The only guy in the school whose family had proper TV channels used to tape wrestling events and rent them out. Apple laptops in middle school. Some had iTunes, some didn't, and the kids wanted it, so I apparently was the only one who knew how to transfer the installer with my USB. I put it on everyone's laptop for gifts, favors, etc. in return. Got caught by the sub that day. I told her it was my flash drive, I could do what I wanted with it. And that's how I got my second detention in my life. Gifts were typical middle schooler stuff. Yu-Gi-Oh cards, fruit snacks, best food trades during lunch, gaining popularity, and hanging out with the cool people. Obviously they were taking advantage of me, but I didn't mind. When I was in the 6th grade, a teacher sold candy in between classes at marked up rates. A student decided to undercut her. That put an end to all candy sales. These little game coupons that our teacher gave out for winning class quiz games. Right when people were starting to get scanners and printers in their own homes, some kid made copies of his coupons and sold or traded them to other students. Since I have some people asking what the coupons could be traded for, it was usually a piece of candy or a pencil with a fun print or something similar. I think the kids ended up getting caught like 2 weeks into the scheme. Edit: a lot of people are comparing this to Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I've heard of but never read before. I think kids are just clever and do this kind of thing on their own because a lot of people in the replies had similar things happen in their own schools as well. I don't know if this is where the kid got his idea or not, but this may have been before those books came out. Silly bands. I remember a kid made like $50 in one day. You know, I actually looked this up because I remember silly bands when I used to go to school, and they ended up being banned in classrooms for being too distracting, which, you know, schools will ban anything if they deem it, quote, distracting. But there have been incidents where children have cut off circulation by extending several silly bands up their arms, in some cases causing serious injuries. You're telling me that my T-Rex-shaped silly band would have cut my circulation off? I had the principal's secretary's handwriting down and used to sell hall passes for $1 each. Made a killing. I don't really know how much I made, but it was in the realm of $5 a day. Sometimes I went dry because you needed the actual pass paper, but I finally figured out how to get into the supply closet, slide the student ID by the latch bolt. I only took a few pads at a time so they wouldn't get suspicious. Edit: I could also forge my mother's signature. Did it so well that when I brought in a note from her that she scribbled on the dash, they called her to confirm. This kid committed forgery. What's not a crime is subscribing to Am I the Genius? Or if you like these videos, you might like Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching! MP3s and CDRs were just becoming available. A guy I knew made a killing on mixed CDs. Every week he circulated forms to fill out, where you selected the songs you wanted on the CD. The newest hits were on the top and changed weekly. The rest of his library filled the rest of the form, and there was a space for requests. He'd deliver your disc the following week. He seriously made bank for a couple years until everybody started getting their songs from LimeWire or whatever. I don't know what he's doing now, 20 years later, but I don't doubt he's successful. Just as a bit of an aside, since a few responses have mentioned LimeWire, when this guy started doing it in high school, the only real avenues for music sharing were Usenet groups and IRC. Nintendo games. Some kids sold them off for like 10 or 15 bucks a pop. I don't know where he got them from, but he said he just told his dad what he wanted and his dad would get it for him. He'd ask for the same ones over and over and it didn't matter. He'd end up with 5 copies and he'd just sell 4 of them. Either the kid was the most spoiled brat in history, or his dad was straight up stealing them anyhow. Anyways, I could never get any. I had a Sega, but I remember that kid making a killing in grade 3. Slap bracelets. Small southern town with just a Walmart and 1 or 2 small clothing stores that carried them. Anyone who went out of town to do clothes shopping or because their parents worked there would come back with bracelets we couldn't get here, so a little black market popped up. This girl Danielle convinced my best friend and I, along with some other people, that she could forever change the taste of saliva in our mouth, so that our saliva would taste like watermelon, cotton candy, bubblegum, etc. forever. She made us wait a couple days so we could really think about what flavor we wanted in our mouth forever. For example, she would tell us, "Are you sure you always want everything you eat to have a hint of watermelon?" Anyways, after a couple days and we picked a flavor, she charged us money. I can't remember how much, but it was probably 50 cents or something. She made us chew on all this crazy stuff like paper clips, erasers, and other things. Obviously, our saliva never changed flavor, and she stopped this. But I worked at Starbucks a couple years ago in my hometown, and she came in and didn't even recognize me. And all I could think about was how that girl had me chewing on paper clips. I would buy 6 packs of soda for $1.79 and resell the 6 sodas for a total of $3. Not labeled for individual sale? Come on, bro. 2 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school, and freshmen weren't allowed to go off campus, but everyone else was. So I'd take orders, go to the local fast food shops, and get the goods. I'd up the price by about $2 and ended up making about $200 a month. The swim team or something were selling these fundraiser lollipops, and they were insanely popular. I found the website on the wrapper and discovered I could buy my own way cheaper. I could also buy only the popular flavors. So I had only the best flavors, and I could undercut the actual fundraisers by a quarter, still making over 100% profit. I quickly became a top seller and made bank until the copycats started popping up. Banana chips were 25 cents in the vending machine in middle school. I always went to school early, so I always ended up buying all of them and selling them for 50 cents a bag. My school was an extremely conservative Christian boarding school. Things that were forbidden were, by no means a complete list, jeans for girls, shorts for everyone, candy, any sort of food in the dorms, cell phones, any form of gaming system, TV or movies, playing non-Christian songs on musical instruments, clothes made by popular brands, A&F and Hollister, etc. Naturally, there were a few students who started selling food, candy, and A&F/Hollister clothes. Why people bought these from them, I don't know, but they made huge amounts of money. A lot of the kids at that school were rich doctors' kids, so there was plenty of money to go around. One guy sold a box of Altoids for $15. TLDR, my high school was so strict that the black market was people paying ridiculous amounts of money for food and snacks. I lived in an area with a lot of retiree-age people, a lot of which ended up raising their grandchildren. It really isn't a good area. Being older and from a rural area, they still don't trust online sites like eBay or Amazon, so I started ordering people things from those sites for actual money and added a charge for me to be making money off of it. It eventually got shut down because I got someone a USB in the shape of a pistol. It was the size of a USB and clearly a USB, but it didn't matter. The principal actually got the police involved to try to get me in real trouble. Some kids made a habit of stealing chalk when the teachers weren't looking. After a while, they started selling it, charging more for longer and fresher sticks. It ended with someone eventually snitched on a buyer, which started a cascade of counter-snitching. A cascade of counter-snitching. That is such a beautiful sentence. Many pockets were emptied, some with chalk, but most of the dealers had hidden their chalk and got away with it. I was a Pokemon card smuggler. In 6th grade, my friend's dad overheard my friend and I talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn some were $10 to $20 a piece. He made the comment, "Shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them." That comment stuck with me, and a few days later, I started selling my cards at school. I made a list of everything I had with prices next to them. I passed the list around during class, and kids would meet up with me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making crazy amounts of money for a middle schooler, and before long, parents were complaining that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards. So, the school banned them. But I still had a good bit of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in boxes of crayons, I put a few sheets of sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legit notes. I even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all my cards. Despite getting searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks, my cards were never found, and I was able to sell all of them before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy my entire immediate and extended family Christmas gifts with my own money for the first time. Once all the other kids learned how much money I had made, they were blown away, and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. Problem was, no one was buying them anymore. TLDR, I started a one-kid Pokemon card black market, smuggling them into school, and got out of the game right before the bubble burst. Pencils for pencil fighting. The way it worked is, one person would hold their pencil out, grabbing both ends, and then the other person would see if they could break the pencil with theirs by holding one end and then pulling the other end back, snapping it down on the other pencil. We made a website that started as us doing stupid prank phone calls and jerkwad stunts. It turned into a homework sharing and answers to tests and quizzes that people would steal later. Luckily, I wasn't involved by that time, but my friends weren't involved in graduation. Marbles were big at my primary school. Real big. It got to the stage where they were only allowed for 3 months a year, as we would no longer discuss anything but the game we had or the make we wanted to pay for. That was marble season. Now you could buy a big bag of cat's eyes from the supermarket, but they wouldn't get you far. To play the high-stakes games, you needed a specked egg, a glitter bomb, a tidal wave, or something exotic, but those suckers were pricey. Us poor kids couldn't afford those things, so we secretly gambled our marbles through the year. So when marble season opened, we had amassed enough marbles to really be ahead of the game. Being caught with marbles outside of marble season was bad, real bad. One kid got 5 strokes of the cane. This being so, it was a big risk to hide in the shadows of the trees and sling those little glass balls about. Not only did it hone your skills for the season's start, but you got good at taking the shot and then acting nonchalant. Marbles were currency. You could trade lunches with them or buy time on playground equipment. There was a good reason they banned marbles at my school. We turned it into some sort of mafia crap. My mom won a year's supply of double-stuffed Oreos. I sold them in Ziploc bags while in 4th grade to everyone I could, even teachers. My mom thought my friends were eating them all. Me and my best friends sold packs of gum in middle school. We'd make around $30 a day, and the teachers were going crazy trying to find where all the gum was coming from. As model students, they never suspected us. I'm kinda glad that I'm not the only one who knew high schoolers obsessed with gum. Every day, almost every period, I would hear people asking people for gum. They'd even ask me, nerdy kid who no one really talked to, if I had gum. That's when you knew they were desperate. Live fish. Some Asian kid would walk around school with a few live pet fish in his school bag and sell them. Pop rocks in the late 70s. Kid drove 40 miles from Alabama to Catholic school in Georgia and got him an AL and doubled the price in GA. Sister Charles broke up the ring before we could find out if drinking Coke and eating Pop Rocks blew up your stomach. Pink eye, $5. In middle school, you could come to school with pink eye and make a lot of money off of kids who wanted to miss a test. Kid would just stick his finger in his own eye and then in yours. The f***? No! I hate that. These Hispanic kids in my school brought a bunch of Mexican snacks to class and sold them for cheap. Those mango lollipops with the chili powder on them, or whatever it is, were the bomb. Actually, I happen to have a hustle. My friend lived in New Orleans. She moved away from my state and came up to visit. It was just Mardi Gras, and she had a whole trunk full of beads. She gave me an entire bucket of them because they were literally in over their heads. I marketed them at school as authentic beads from the real Mardi Gras, and kids were paying 50 cents for one of them. I should have majored in business instead of becoming an art student. During elementary school in the 80s, many candies weren't individually wrapped for resale in stores. Think Warheads, etc. I bought bulk packs of candy, didn't matter what kind, although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. I individually packed them, or maybe a couple to a pack depending on the candy. I used those tiny Ziplocs you see people use for drugs. Being around adults a little devoid of scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time looking back. I was the only supplier for a year solid in 4th grade. I made so much bank for a 10-year-old, it was insane. I would make $100 a week just off of atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs were about $5 or $6 each wholesale, and at a quarter each, it worked out to about $60 a jug profit if I recall. Luckily, school came easy to me because it was a full-time job keeping stock, packaging product, counting piles of change, budgeting, keeping a bank register, mom got a separate account that I used for my money, dodging the man, etc. It was turbulent as I never really had a group of friends as a kid, but in the 4th grade, I was the freaking man. Going from having no real, quote, good friends, and having my time divided by either being picked on or ignored, to becoming the belle of the ball was surreal. Even at that time, I was able to realize what was going on. Their smiles were all fake. Their interest was not in me, but rather what was in my bag any given day. Girls were not saying hello because they were being polite, or even the least bit interested in talking to me. They were just waiting their turn for their fix. That denim bag got more attention than I ever dreamed of. I was just along for the ride. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When the 5th grade started, there was competition, but they were weak. They would always sell out or only buy enough to make a few bucks here and there, largely selling lollipops or prepackaged stuff, Hershey's Kisses, Bit of Honey or Tootsie Rolls, whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They had made a mockery of something I took seriously, as seriously as a 10 to 11-year-old can take something. I closed up shop pretty quickly after the school year began. The fast life and fast money was over. The excitement wasn't there, the smiles weren't as big. Kids came to me as a last resort. They bought the popular kids completely out before looking my way. It was like flipping a switch. My first day without the bag, I had a few kids ask if I was holding, but once word got around that I was out of the game, everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus. No one interested, fake or otherwise. It was the first time I had ever really witnessed the dynamic of being disingenuine. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. I've never really recounted this time into words. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in the 4th grade. TLDR, I peaked in the 4th grade.
Non-Americans. What's the craziest rumor you heard about America that turned out to be true? Surfer dudes actually speak like that. Californians actually speak like that too. This video feels like a nice little full circle on my first video with the channel, which was about things that surprised non-Americans about the US. Thanks for watching these last few months, folks. I'm from Quebec, and when we went down to Boston for a school trip, I sneezed in public and heard 2 or 3 people say, "Bless you." Quite a weird rumor I had heard not 2 months prior to that. I thought it was nice. Wait, you don't say bless you when someone sneezes? I mean, it's not like it means anything, so I could understand why. It just seems so strange not to say anything. I mean, how else were we supposed to deal with the demons that escape through sneezes? That people actually get attacked by alligators which got in their pools, specifically referring to Florida here. There are boa constrictors in Florida as well. So apparently yellow school buses are actually a thing in America. I honestly thought it was a cartoon thing, but nope. That Dolly Parton has her own theme park in Tennessee. I thought it was a joke. That woman is a saint. She has a book program for children where, once they're born, they'll receive a free children's book once a month until they turn 5. That's amazing! She absolutely is. She's done amazing things for people, especially where she grew up. She deserves far more credit than she already has. My 2 sons are in that program, and she eats at the Mexican restaurant across the street from my house. I live in Nashville. She's super sweet and down to earth. I always thought that Olive Garden in The Simpsons was just code for generic restaurant. I mean, that's not entirely incorrect. Olive Garden is probably the closest you could get to beige if restaurants were colors. And when I first saw The Big Bang Theory, I thought for years that the Cheesecake Factory was a made-up restaurant. 'Tis such a silly name. If I don't like someone but am still socially obligated to get them a gift, I get them a gift card for Olive Garden or Applebee's. I studied in Maryland for about half a year back in 2017. I'd always heard that Americans are like super good at pie. I was pretty much all alone during Thanksgiving since everyone else was with their families. One of the RAs I'd befriended knocked on my door and bought me all different kinds of pie. Dear Lord, I've never tasted anything that delicious. From blueberry to apple to pumpkin. Every single pie. They were all amazing. I actually don't properly know if this is true, but you have like a whole aisle in your supermarkets dedicated to just the hundreds of cereals you have. Mostly true, it's cereal and other breakfast items like granola and oatmeal, but mostly cereal. All the food is bigger. Free refills. I'm from Australia, and all my life I believed red Solo cups were like 555 area codes, a Hollywood prop. When I emigrated to the US, my mother-in-law was making dinner, and offered me iced tea in a red Solo cup. I lost it, made everyone sign the cup, and I've still got it. The Solo cup stories always kill me. We had some German exchange students in high school, and one of them loved how many American things were just like in the movies. We rode in the back of a truck to a pizza place for lunch that day, and he was loving it. In the afternoon, there was a party/get-together at someone's house. The kid was eyeing the stack of Solo cups and coyly asked, "Can I keep one?" We said sure, and the red Solo cup was the cherry on top of his American experience that day. Masked people come to your house, knock on your door asking for candy. Mostly it's just packs of kids, but sometimes it's whole families. This was my friend's Halloween culture shock. It's a ton of fun to hang out next to the walkway in a costume, pretending to be one of the decorations and scare people as they walk past you. Sports bars are actually exactly how they're portrayed on the TV. Yeah, just much less attractive people. Drink sizes. Holy crap. When my family visited in 2017, we landed in Texas for a stopover. First thing I saw in the shops, part of the terminal, was a dude who was drinking from what actually looked like an actual frickin' bucket. Here in New Zealand, our large drinks would be considered an American small, or maybe medium. We need bigger cups than most of the world, since over half the cup is filled with ice. Not exactly crazy, but I wanted to test out the stereotype that Americans will talk to anyone, so I sought out a sports bar on my first visit. Ended up having a ton of really fun conversations with total strangers who I'll never talk to again. It was great! American, I will speak to anyone about anything. I can't even count the number of times I've randomly started conversations with strangers, become friends within 30 minutes, then never spoken to them again. When I started traveling for work, I'd often find myself in bars or on flights and buses alone, so I'd end up starting a conversation so I could have some human interaction. As a Canadian, it amazes me how much people around the world keep to themselves. I go to a big ski hill in the mountains a lot and look forward to chilling on ski lifts, chatting with some of the wise old skier dudes. I have long, heartfelt conversations with random's dads on airplanes, and it's great. Again, naturalized European narrator here, it seems like such a damn culture shock to have random people engage in conversation and have, or at least seem to have, genuine interest in the conversation. It's deeply unnatural, but quite pleasant for us. Biscuits and gravy is a legit thing. Also, you can ride motorcycles without helmets in some states, and your iced tea isn't sweetened unless you ask for sweet. Nothing could have possibly prepared me for the absolute dichotomy of sweet tea versus iced teas in the comments to this. This is evidently very important to many. A good sausage gravy with sage and black pepper, with some good flaky biscuits, is one of the best southern comfort foods, along with a cup of strong, sweet iced tea. Crazy hospitable. Turned out to be true. Talkative. Turned out to be true as well. $2 bills. American state and national parks are some of the most beautiful places on Earth. All parks could use more funding, but American parks are well-staffed and maintained. There's real pride there. I love our national and state park systems. One of my state parks recently got a herd of bison, which I haven't seen in the wild since my trip to Yellowstone. The week I graduate, I'm going to go see them and relax in nature. The minimal amount of paid days off you can get from work. A friend of mine from Wisconsin was very proud he got 20 days off per year. If someone in Germany would offer me only 20 days, I would laugh at him and leave. So student loans. How does it work in the USA? In the UK, when you go to a university, you take out a student loan, and after uni, when you earn a certain amount per year, a percentage above that threshold goes towards paying it back. However, if you don't earn that much, I don't know how much, maybe 20 to 25k per year, then you pay nothing. Then after a while, if you haven't paid it back, 30 years, maybe 40, then it just disappears and you don't have to pay it. In America, do you have to pay regardless of income? Is there a time limit after which debt expires and disappears? No. The only time the debt expires or disappears is if you die or pay it off. Most people have co-signers, which tend to be parents or family members, so even if they die, the co-signer will be forced to pay the student loan debt, on top of dealing with the loss of a loved one. Americans are nice and will stop to talk to strangers. Canadian here, living in Alberta. To anyone who's never been, you'll be blown away by the general Americans' generosity of their time, knowledge, and helpfulness. I've done a few summers of road trips from Calgary. One time I went to as far east as Ohio, Tennessee, as far south as New Orleans and Dallas, went through the flatlands, and rode up the Rockies the rest of the way home. I have visited almost all the landlocked states, 5 more to go, and 4 along the Gulf states, all by car. I've been through a lot of big American cities and a lot of tiny towns. All of you, north to south, make Canadians look like bloody savages. I expected something worse, probably because of television and internet. I ended up leaving your country after the first time I visited, blown away and with a newfound very real love for my southern neighbors. Been 5 times on multi-week trips. We'll spend time and money there again. 10 out of 10. America has libraries that are essentially free to use. This was not even a rumor, but more like a sarcastic comment from a friend who heard I was excited to go to the US, because he knew what book nerds my entire family are. When I first arrived here 25 years ago, the first day of work at Newark, New Jersey, I walked out at lunchtime and saw the huge central library. The size boggled my mind, but I bravely walked in to check it out. The guy says, "Yep, show me your work ID, or local address, and you get a membership card." Me? How much does it cost? I only own $80 until I get my first pay. Him, bemused, almost laughing, "It's free, you don't pay for anything." It took me some time to recover from the shock of this. So, how many books am I allowed to take home? I was expecting that to be a catch. Maybe I need to put down a security deposit for each book. He was now positively enjoying himself. How many can you carry? That day I took home 30 plus books, just being greedy, and quickly called my dad to tell him about it. For a guy who painstakingly would browse used bookstores in small-town India just to get his kids great books to read, he was suitably amazed. He was puzzled if it would kill the bookstore business, because who'd buy if such great free libraries existed? Up to the present day, I feel such gratitude for being able to come here, and when Dad visited some years later, I would drop him off at a library on my way to work, and he'd be lost in it all day. To address some of the questions people are now sending me, yes, by take home I meant borrowed to return. Carrying those books home has a story too. The librarian saw my dilemma and wanted to stick to his original "how many can you carry?" comment, and would not allow me to discard any, so went off and got me 2 large bags made of cloth or canvas, like grocery bags. And when I lugged all of that on the train back to New Jersey that evening, I had to walk home from the train station, no car, to a mile away. Normally not bad, but with those books, it was tedious. A cop saw me and gave me a lift home. He loved my story about the library too. India today is slightly better, but as a kid in a small town, the only library I saw was at my school, where books were never allowed to be taken home. And then there was this single shop where you subscribed to borrow some pulp fiction. The Asiatic Library in Bombay was big. I saw it when I visited my cousins, but it had a wait list, I think, of 4 years, because they couldn't handle too many members. I'm always amazed at what all libraries offer. I took my parents for a movie showing once, set up as a once-a-month thing for seniors, and they were shocked that it was free. And they were giving away cookies and stuff too, along with pleasant company. My girls have learned to love the library as much as I do, and probably have read more books than most kids at school. My daughter won an award for some accelerated reading, and at age 9 gave a speech about the impact of libraries for her, and how much her dad and grandpa loved them. Thank you, libraries and librarians. This started off as a simple praise of America's libraries, but turned into a really cute, fresh-off-the-boat story that would probably make a number of people want to move to the land of the free. Maybe do your research first, though, folks. As an American, I think you could ask the title question to Americans, 'cause there are some weird friggin' states, man. Dry counties, cities where places aren't allowed to be open on a Sunday, or there can only be certain hours on Sunday. Not being able to pump your own gas. Whoa, there are places where you can't pump your own gas? I feel like I'm an idiot for not knowing this. Oregon here, can confirm. Afraid to drive outside the state because I don't know how to pump my own gas. That you can identify Texans with the simple phrase, "The stars at night are big and bright," and someone else will go, "Deep in the heart of Texas." That Hawaiians really like Spam. Yeah, and there's a perfectly good reason for it too. After Pearl Harbor, the effects of World War II started in the US and rationing became a thing. Well, it turns out that it's kind of hard to get fresh rations to an island that imports a lot. So for meat, they had to make do with Spam. Human ingenuity prevails and dishes were made, and that's how Hawaii learned to love Spam. The honking. I thought it was a movie stereotype. Then I went to New York. It's rare outside the big cities though, in my opinion. If you think that's bad, try going to India. Parents were from the USSR. They were freaking shocked about how nice you Americans are. They said that y'all were a weird type of nice, but nice regardless. It didn't even matter that they were from the USSR, moved to the States post-collapse. You Americans seemed to accept them anyway. I, American, had such a pleasant interaction with a tourist from Russia the other day, in Walmart of all places. I saw a man that clearly looked confused in the auto section, so I walked toward him and he tried to explain what he was looking for, but he hardly spoke any English at all. So I pulled my phone out to use Google Translator and told him to speak into my phone. The translation came back that he was looking for detergent for bugs in love bed, so I took him to an aisle to look for bed bug killer. He looked so confused and pulled out a piece of paper that had "Love Bug Wash" written on it in English, so I took him back to the auto section and helped him pick out some car soap. He kept saying, "God bless," to me. We laughed a lot through the process, and I thought it was so cool that we could speak different languages but still communicate. To clarify, love bug is a type of fly. We call them love bugs because after mating, adult pairs remain coupled, even in flight, for up to several days, like they're in love. But we get them in huge numbers during mating season, spring or summer. Because of this, a lot of cars will be covered in these love bugs that they ran into the road. This is Florida, by the way. Sorry, I let this one get quite far off track, because I was so interested in the gosh darn love bugs. Also, why do all the weirdest things seem to converge on Florida? They have milk in gallon cartons. When I visited America, I went to a supermarket for some breakfast stuff, cereal and milk. All they had was milk in gallons. Who could possibly have that much milk? I asked for a smaller carton, and the lady who worked there just laughed at me and asked me if we just don't like milk in England very much. Many supermarkets have half gallons and quarter gallons, but honestly, I'm surprised that it's an issue. I live alone and go through a gallon of milk in just a few days. I drink at least 7 gallons a day to ensure I get enough calcium. That American kids eat straight sugar. Walked onto the playground and saw kids chugging these long, thin sticks. I'd try and it was just colored sugar. They called them pixie sticks. Oh boy, wait till you find out about Fun Dips. You have a hard candy stick, so all sugar, that you lick and then dip into a colored sugar sack to make it stick to the sugar stick. Then you lick the sugar powder off the sugar stick. After you finish all the powder, you eat the stick. Before I came to the States, as we called it, I lived in Germany. The area I lived in had no fireflies. So when I got to the States, I did not believe my eyes, as I finally saw fireflies light up the world as I fell asleep. I also thought that New York City was a popular fictional city. I didn't believe it actually existed. At the time, it seemed too large and extraordinary to possibly exist. For those talking about other countries, I didn't know there were other countries at the time either. I only knew of places I had lived, which was Germany and soon to be the US. I was never told about the concept of countries until I went to an American school. The "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" song that's apparently sung at baseball games. Still not entirely sure that guy wasn't taking the mickey out of me. Female here. I've been in bathrooms where the gap between the stall and the door is so big I felt the need to cover it with my purse just to get some privacy. The absolute worst is when some mother brings her grubby-handed son into the bathroom and you see a freaking 8-year-old's eye staring at you from the other side of the door. That your country is huge. I got off the plane and asked the cab guy how far the hotel was, and he said about 30 miles. I almost had a heart attack. Turns out cabs are cheaper than the UK though. I can't remember the price I paid, but I was pleasantly surprised. The UK cabs are like £4 per mile. Also, you would get laughed out of the taxi for asking to go 30 miles and not taking the train. Not really crazy, but I just learned you guys have like outdoor sirens that get tested somewhat frequently. I've only heard those noises in video games and movies until my friend sent me a clip, because I had no idea it actually happened. In many areas of the US, these sirens are used to warn of impending severe weather and potential tornadoes. Sirens are tested on the first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. around Chicago. My dad heard this crazy rumor about everyone getting drunk and wearing green for one day a year. He obviously didn't know this was a holiday and was like, WTF. When he came to the US and he discovered St. Patrick's Day, he was amazed. My dad is from China, for you affronted Irish people. St. Patrick's Day in the US is an excuse for ordinary Americans to act the way that middle-aged Londoners act when on holiday in Dublin, only with more plastic leprechaun hats and glitter. Yeah, and on top of that, suddenly everyone's part Irish. When I say suddenly part Irish, I'm not implying everyone's lying. A lot of them are probably telling the truth since there's so many Irish Americans. What I meant is that no one mentions this fact until St. Patrick's Day. People of Walmart. One of the nicest people in one of the towns I lived in is pictured on People of Walmart. He's known as Willie the Pimp, or just Mr. Willie. Older gentleman, just likes to dress flashy because it makes people smile to see beautiful things. Before he got too old to drive, you could spot his car by the flower arrangements he attached to the side of the front bumper. As a Brit living in America, the amount of pharmaceutical commercials on TV is creepy. Smiling person living life to the fullest. Narrator? Side effects include anal bleeding, gigantism, lupus, skin shedding, and death. Ask your doctor about Prolax today. The SAT exam being multiple choice. Multiple choice exams in general. That you can get into university just by being good at sports. Like what the frick? Yep, most schools have academic and athletic scholarships, not just academic ones. It's not always a full ride, and you still have to qualify academically, which is occasionally a problem, but that's usually a bare minimum baseline. The reason is that college sports are almost as popular as professional sports, especially football and basketball. Those sports bring money and fame to players and schools, so it's common for schools to try and get the best players to commit. The school I went to, UVA, won the most recent college basketball championship, and now they're well known around the US. Nearly every man is circumcised regardless of religion. Checking in, Catholic. Am snipped. I had an interaction with a British friend online where I said that something looked like a flaccid pee-pee and he was really confused. When I traced over what I was saying, we realized that I was picturing a flaccid, circumcised pee-pee, and he, being more familiar with the uncut variety, hadn't seen what I did. It was the first time I realized that other parts of the world wouldn't be inclined to circumcise every male child. Now I'm just not sure why it's so pervasive in the US to begin with. They have garbage disposals in their kitchens. That's so wild to me. To clarify, I'm from the UK. I'm aware that they're not the same as bins or trash cans and that they're mainly for food waste and scraps. I'm also delighted that they're called garberators in Canada. Homeowners associations. What the frick is up with that? The place that my wife and I bought came with a busybody of an HOA president. We got a fricking note stapled to our gate that said our clothes line had to be removed because it was an eyesore. So I wrote back and told her about how crappy our dryer is, and that we're in the fricking desert anyway, so hanging them up is the most environmentally friendly way to dry clothes anyway. Still got another note during laundry day the following week, so I stapled a note to her door that said, "If you want me to have a good dryer, then buy me one. Otherwise, kindly F off." Haven't heard from her since, not even a note. Hope she's okay. When you sail west, you arrive in America and not India. Then why do they call them Indians? Phew, this guy. Can you really just buy a Glock at Walmart? At my local Walmart, you can bring your car in for an oil check, get an eye exam, get a haircut, eat lunch at the in-store Subway, purchase a Glock, purchase groceries, purchase a frickin' couch, then go home once the background check for the Glock is finished and the oil change is done. Other things I forgot to add, you can purchase alcohol depending on state. You can get your taxes done there, you can get your birthday cake made, print pictures from a USB, phone, etc., get dog tags made, get spare keys made, rent movies, pick up a full-course meal for dinner at the deli. What's the most ridiculous rule in your place of work? I'm a teacher, so I have a million stupid rules I have to follow. But the worst one is that my performance evaluation is based on student improvement on the STAR literacy test. I teach woodshop. At my old job, HR held a meeting to tell us that there was too much swearing on the sales floor. Someone raised their hand and pointed out that swearing is very common in our industry, and that it is the way that our customers speak. HR later sent out a memo explaining that swearing should be limited to conversations with clients. It was amazing. Please only swear when in the presence of a customer. All customers should be greeted with a jolly, "What the frick is up?" or a chipper, "Who the frick crapped on you today, you B-word?" Any attempts to not insult or demean our customers will be written up. Frick you and have a great day. HR. Somewhere I have the email printed out. I had a crazy crap folder where I kept nutty emails, and that HR memo was definitely one of the best. If you are stuck in traffic on the way to work, you must email the CEO. Phone calls and texts are not permitted, only email. I'd get that one in writing and send it to the corporate insurer. If you're supposed to email the CEO when you're late, there's probably no corporate insurer, there's probably not much of a corporation for that matter. I used to work at a place in which my boss implemented a no more than 2 glasses of water a day policy. What a chump. I ignored this rule and complained directly to our CEO, and the matter ended later that day. What was weird though was that the majority of people actually followed the rule, and some even shopped me up to HR about breaking the rules. I left not long after that because not only was my boss a member, but if my colleagues were going to HR over me drinking water, then I obviously couldn't trust them. What industry was this where they felt the need to limit water drinking? Sadly, they were probably trying to limit bathroom breaks. As a man who is guzzling water from dawn to dusk, admittedly, probably just because voice acting is a little tough on the throat, I would revolt if a boss tried to implement this. Had a workplace time our bathroom breaks and deduct them from our allotted 15-minute breaks for lunch. We had to go see the office manager to get a key to open the restroom. As soon as we left his office, he would start a timer. When you got back, he would stop the timer and tell you how much time you needed to deduct from your lunch or next break. They watched our breaks like a hawk. Also, if you made a mistake, they would stand over you and time you while you fixed it and deduct that from your lunch or breaks. You couldn't bring anything that smells for lunch, and they had no way of heating anything up. I worked out my contract and split. I would troll the heck out of that manager. Just pee in the sink. Then go ask for the bathroom key, be gone for 21 seconds, and give the key back. Do this often. Confuse the frick out of him while simultaneously interrupting his day 30 times. Worth it. Business casual dress code even when I work at home. They Skype me to check.
What the frick? Why? What business are you in?
Exactly my thoughts on it. I'm an intern for a small logistics company. My dad told me this one a while back. He used to work for a PR firm. The way he described the office environment, think The Office, but in the 1980s. The company hired a corporate efficiency specialist to come in and improve things. She came in and implemented all kinds of rules which seemed to follow some sort of caste system. Her philosophy was the higher your rank, the more perks you get. Her idea of perks? Number of pictures you're allowed in your cubicle. Whether you were allowed to have a potted plant or not. Coffee mugs were only allowed to senior employees. Others had to use paper cups. Being allowed to leave the office for lunch was also considered a perk. Needless to say, a coup soon followed and she was tossed out on her hiney. Dress code policy is just dumb at my work. Different positions have different requirements, even though we all work in the same office. My favorite rule, though, is the one on shorts. We can wear shorts on Fridays, between Memorial Day and Labor Day. However, the shorts can't have pockets on the side. It was written to discourage ratty cargo shorts, but the way in which it was written allows me to wear gym shorts. So I do. Once worked at a place where some mini-boss decided that since UPS trucks don't turn left, we shouldn't either. I don't know if UPS trucks turn left or not, or if that is beneficial to them or not, and frankly, I don't care. The point is that mini-boss thought they did, and that was the reasoning he gave. He was an idiot, I didn't stay there long. This was a goddamn ambulance company with a 911 contract. I will turn left if and when I fricking need to turn left. Not my current job, but I used to work for some crazy people. You had to stand in a specific area while eating so they could see you on the camera. Don't talk to customers longer than 3 minutes unless you're making a big sale. Even then, keep it short. Answer the phone within 2 rings. Keep the conversation to less than 30 seconds. You can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. You can't talk to your coworkers while at work, even if there was not a single customer in the store. I'm sure there's more, I just can't think of them right now. Old job of mine in a warehouse. Our stations were pretty far apart, so when we'd listen to music, we'd all usually have our own stuff playing. Not a problem since you could barely hear the neighbor's music. Well, the CEO didn't like hearing multiple songs when walking through the warehouse. He made a rule that we all either had to listen to the same music or none at all. I'd put on the same song, but everyone started at 15 seconds apart. We got a new vacation policy where you could take unlimited time off. When he announced it, we looked at the big boss like he had a pee-pee growing out of his forehead. All the while, he assured us that if we wanted vacation, to take it. Really? A little bit awkward. He changed it to discretionary time off, meaning that if your boss approved, it was okay. Then changed it to 160 hours should be the max, and if you go over 200 hours, then you probably don't need to work here. I can't reconcile with how these people implement these policies and come across as a good person in their own heads. It's one thing to be desperate in rough times, but the sneakiness is what gets me. I once needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin. She told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco. I work in Milwaukee. So I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet. This is my favorite one so far. It's so ridiculous in every way. In my first one-on-one with my boss, she asked me how everything was going. I said fine, but explained that I wasn't able to get a pen, which made taking notes and meetings difficult. She got up, went to her desk, and grabbed me a handful of pens. If you had to take leave on Monday or Friday so that you had an extended weekend of 3 days instead of 2, it was counted as 3 days leave, counting Saturday and Sunday. Deal with that. This was in a small private company in India dealing with medical writing. If you're 1 minute late, it's tardy. If you take a half day, nothing goes on your record. I was told to just take a half day if you're going to be late because they straight up fire you for tardies. Also, if you clock out early, it's a tardy. If you have to go to the doctor on lunch break and it's going to take an hour and 10 minutes, take the rest of the day off. Weird. Firemen. Our risk management department decided long ago that poles were too risky for us. So we used the stairs. We have polls. Anyway, now the newest rule is no free weights, as in no free weights to work out and stay fit. Go into burning high-rise, absolutely. Walk around the station carrying 40-pound dumbbells, too risky.
I feel you. My fire department just got some workout equipment, rowing machine and bike, and it had been delayed due to liability concerns. But we actually have a fire pole that we use. It's all very confusing.
We aren't allowed to wear jackets unless they're purchased from the resort gift shop with the hotel name logo on it. They're $50+ and we don't get reimbursed, but it's the price you pay to stay warm in the cold months.
McDonald's did this to us when I worked there. They paid half, but they were still like $50 to $60 for a crappy fleece. I just wore my regular jacket and nobody said a thing.
Former job. There was trouble when I, officially, moved desks and my new desk had a phone with a call display. Apparently call display phones were allowed for people at a certain pay level. Your pay level also governed the height of your cubicle walls. My manager's solution was to promote me. Another former job, we were mandated to work on an engineering-related project outside of work hours, because a responsible engineer always gives back to the engineering community. I could live with that. However, your project had to be related to the company's business. We have to do all of our paperwork at least 3 times. There is a copy of it in our personal folders, a copy online, and a copy in our store folders. Not only does it waste time and paper, but forgetting to do one has gotten people fired. They did the other 2 identical pieces of paperwork confirming that yes, they did take out the trash, and yes, they did check the store voicemail, but how dare they forget to do the 3rd piece of identical paperwork? Our weekly visits from corporate revolve around whether or not we've done all this paperwork. It's so redundant. My workplace doesn't let you use the word problems. Instead, we have to say challenges if something is wrong, as a problem is a negative word, and challenges promotes the fact that there is room to fix said problem.
But problems have solutions.
I'd love to have a boss tell me my drinking has become a challenge. Former job at a law office. One of the partners sent an email to the entire staff that employees were not allowed to gossip in the building. What was everyone gossiping about, you ask? Oh, said partner was divorcing his wife and sleeping with one of the associate attorneys in the firm. But don't gossip. All the extra toilet paper in the building has to stay in a single closet where it can be overseen by the toilet paper queen. I heard her shrieking the other day when she discovered someone had hoarded one spare roll of toilet paper upstairs, so the people who work upstairs wouldn't have to walk down multiple flights of stairs when the toilet paper ran out. It's the cheapest one-ply toilet paper available on the giant rolls that only fit in the special dispensers. I can't imagine anyone wanting to steal it.
I hope Toilet Paper Queen is actually her title.
She allegedly does other stuff, I'm not sure what exactly. Hear that, kids? If you work real hard and keep your nose clean, you too can maybe one day be your office's toilet paper queen. Godspeed, listeners.
We had a rule like that, so we all pooled $1 and brought our own TP at Costco, double ply. At first, managers were happy that they saved money on TP. Employees were mad that the company should pay for our TP, but it was a very unifying experience. Eventually, managers tried to woo us back to their side when they realized people were sharing pay information and just generally creating a united front. We had a spoon and milk queen who governed all the spoons and milk for my office. She would go around desks and hound people for spoons. People bought their spoons in so they wouldn't have to deal with her. But she didn't understand that people could bring in stuff from home and was adamant that they must belong to the company, and got angry if you opposed her spoon reclamation mission. She also redesigned our kitchen. In her grand redesign, she left out a cutlery drawer. But we still have triple height pots and pans drawer, so that's something. Although no cooker or pots and pans, so it's completely empty. Thankfully, she was let go. I used to work for the now long-defunct books, movies, and music store, MediaPlay. Just one of the 285 reasons that poorly run businesses ran into the ground was the tardy or attendance policies. If you were literally 0.01 seconds late clocking in, even hours before the store opened, it was a really, really big deal. You'd not only be formally written up, but lectured like a child, oftentimes berated even. If you were tardy 3 times, bye-bye. However, if you no-showed and then called 2 hours later saying you were sick, okay, thank you, feel better,
This trained everyone to just take sick days instead of being half a second late to work. I can't tell you how many times you'd see a coworker screeching into the parking lot before work after fighting traffic from a wreck or whatever, noticing it was 8:01 and then slowly driving off to go home and feign being sick. This was particularly upsetting when it was pull-down stock week, when we needed every hand on deck but had unusually early shifts. My job years ago tried to implement a very strict attendance policy like that, where if you were 1 second late, you would get written up. Till one Saturday, a guy who worked there for like 30 years shows up to work 30 seconds late. They pull him into the office and write him up. He then gets up and tells them that he's going home. Working Saturdays was voluntary, and he basically said, "I don't have to be here today, so I'm going home." He was doing them a favor by working that day, but when they wrote him up for being 30 seconds late, he basically fricked them over by just going home. That policy didn't last too much longer. For the most part, if you're a few minutes late, it's no big deal at all. If you're late all the time, they'll have a word with you or write you up. But they understand crap happens sometimes that's out of your control to cause you to be late.
Yeah, screwing over company veterans is historically a bad move in business. Glad that guy had the balls to leave and the rule was cancelled.
Many years ago, I was a vacuum cleaner salesman. There were songs about this particular brand of vacuum cleaner and how awesome it was. Every morning, we had to sing these songs as a group. In fairness, it was a pretty quality item. It was Kirby. Didn't mean to be subversive, I just didn't think anyone would care. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him best as I could. Apparently, he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew, in fact, he'd been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. If we want to take a full 5 days off week, we need to use 2 vacation days. 1 personal and 2 more vacation days. We can never use 3 vacation days straight.
Something similar here. We can't use our sick time until we use 3 vacation days. So let's say I have no vacation hours, but get really sick. I can't use paid time off. Our sick time is essentially useless.
We work alternating days, 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. If you take vacation on your short week, which is 3 working days, they dock you 5 vacation days for taking an entire week off.
How is that legal?
I drive valet. The company handbook says you're never allowed to back up. Ever. You absolutely cannot do the job without reverse. It's impossible. It's in there because of liability and our insurance policy. This way, it can always be the valet's fault if an accident ever occurs. Perhaps this will answer the most repeated question: if the rule says no reverse, yet you're expected to park a car, how can you park the car? Answer: never hit anything and always reverse despite the rules. Expect to be fired should you hit anything in reverse, but probably not. The rule only exists to cover the company's butt, but if they don't feel threatened by you working there and you're an asset, you will still not be fired. And yes, many people are questioning the legality of it, and you're right. It wouldn't hold up in courts, but it's in the handbook and it's silly, so I posted it. We can't ask others if they just want to come and grab a coffee in the break room.
Just develop a subtle nod that means the same thing.
How about a slap on the bum and a wink? The last commenter's suggestion for a signal is hilarious, but also feels like a great way to noticeably break a whole bunch of other, much more strictly enforced rules. Not accusing other staff members of being witches. Yeah, it happened, so we had to make a rule. I run a hostel in Uganda. It's not like this anymore, but for a while they attempted to have a dress code. Guys had to wear collared shirts, but Hawaiian-style shirts were totally acceptable. You could not wear jean shorts, but jean overall shorts were okay. I got sent home one day because my shorts weren't fingertip length. We were tech support. No one ever saw us, that was the best part. Because everyone is asking, fingertip length meant standing with your arms at your sides, and your shorts had to be longer than where your fingertips ended. Think grade school rules. I worked as a call receiver. We never saw a customer. We were only on the phones with them. Rule: your hair must be only a natural color. I dyed my hair the exact same color that someone from a different shift had. I was reprimanded. I told them that if the rule was not enforced for everyone, they couldn't single me out. Their reason for letting the other person have that color but not me: mine was my real hair dyed to an unnatural color. Hers was a weave that could be changed very easily. Really? Then why hasn't she been asked to change her hair? Because that crap is expensive. They gave up trying to convince me they were right.
I had a boss who didn't like the outrageous color I had in my hair. I'm a natural redhead.
One of my sisters actually got fired for a job for something similar. She's a natural blonde, but kept her hair dyed red for years. When she decided to go back to her natural hair color to cut expenses, professional dye jobs aren't cheap, her boss flipped out and insisted that she go back to red, pointing out that the company had a rule that prohibited dyed hair. He didn't believe her when she pointed out that this was her natural hair color, and fired her for insubordination and violating company policy when she flat out refused to go red again. Actually, she did offer to go red again if the company paid the styling bill. When she went in to pick up her last check a few days later, she took in a handful of pictures of her younger self to prove that blonde really was her natural color. Her boss just looked at them and said, "That just means you've been violating company policy for years, and that I should have fired you a long time ago. Don't bother using us as a reference." She was talking to a lawyer about a possible lawsuit, but I don't think anything ever came of it. I work in retail and we have on-call shifts. Your name will be listed on the schedule for a certain time as a call-in, so you have to call 1 hour before your shift to figure out if they need you to work for the day. For example, you'd be listed as on call for 2 p.m. and wouldn't know until 1 p.m. if you were working that evening. If you don't call in, it's considered not showing up for a shift, but there's no extra pay for the shift whether they need you or not. So for 3 days of the week, I don't know if I have work or not. Can't make any solid plans to do anything except call my work and ask if they need me. I can't imagine having children or elderly that need taken care of because it would be such a hassle to arrange care for them just an hour before having to work. You people reading this want me to sue this corporate demon. I'm looking into it now and will update with any relevant developments. I'm going to dig up my contract tomorrow and see if I can speak to a law person. Thanks for motivating me. I don't know if it's a standard, but I worked at a place where HR wasn't allowed to tell us if someone was fired. It was a big enough place that you might not immediately realize someone had left, and when you'd found out, you weren't supposed to ask why. So if you wanted to know if they were fired, you'd ask, "Was there cake?" Which was to say that if the person had retired or left pleasantly after a number of years, they'd be given a party with cake. If they were fired, not so much. For example, "I haven't seen Brian for some time. Brian no longer works here. Was there cake?" We have a lock on the first aid kits, so if you need a band-aid for a cut, you have to get the key from the safety guy, which in turn makes it a reportable accident, with mountains of paperwork and investigations. We use an unbelievable amount of duct tape now. Frick that, I'd be keeping a box of band-aids in a rarely used drawer or hidden away somewhere. There was an issue where there was too much socializing going on the factory floor, particularly when people were working while sitting down. False, skewed supervisor perception. So they made everyone stand. When that presented ergonomics problems, they brought in these weird chairs that made you sit at a slant, had no backs and no wheels, so they wouldn't cause distractions. No part of it made any sense. I feel it. At my old job as a pet bather at a pet chain, we had a stool in the salon to sit at while using the computer, and I had a personal step stool for sitting while brushing large dogs on the floor. The cashiers next door complained that they weren't able to sit, yet we were, so all stools were ordered out of the salon. I thus had to kneel, squat, or sit on the floor to brush every dog over 75 pounds. You try convincing a Labrador that the short table that goes up into the air is safe for a dog his size. What red flags about a company have you encountered while interviewing for a job? Number of contractors to employees ratio. Also specific keywords such as unlimited potential income or this is not a scam. Unlimited potential income, this, especially when it comes with the really only limiting factor in how you earn is you. Cue cheesy crap-eating grin. I recently had to work on some scripts involving recruitment techniques for life insurance agency development heads. And after processing all of it and learning some of the crap they use to try and cajole you into buying insurance or recruit you, I've concluded that they're terrible. Primerica by chance? They dealt with life insurance and tried to recruit me by paying $500 to take a class and get my license. I could make $10,000 a month. No. Also World Financial. I've been dropping friends like flies thanks to those D-bags who trapped them. Any place that requires you to pay for something to come to work for them is a red flag. Extremely high turnover, or you're being interviewed by people who have worked in their department for less than 1 year. This. But the thing is, those places will hire anyone, and that's the upshot. You just have to tough it out for a year so you can get that oh-so-necessary criteria of minimum 1 year's experience that every other freaking employer wants for their entry-level positions.
Yeah, related, I quit a very good job after 5 years because they brought in a new manager who was intolerable. My replacement lasted 3 days before quitting. Over the next year, that position turned over 4 more times, all because no one could stand this manager. Some of the new employees quit after a week or 2. The company finally wised up and realized that the manager was the problem. These are all pretty good red flags so far, but I'll add a few I've encountered. It took me a long time into my career to trust my instincts on these red flags. 1. When you're going to be reporting to more than one person or department. 2. Super condescending attitudes on behalf of the interviewer. 3. I work in IT, and I had a manager ask me once what I would do if I knew that restarting the system was not going to fix the problem and might make it worse. But he would tell me to restart it anyway or find a new job. I told him, if it's going to make things worse, I'm not going to restart the system regardless of what you tell me to do. I ended up getting the job, but that question actually turned out to be a huge red flag. He tried to pull crap like that all the time. 4. If I can't stand someone's personality in a short interview, I'm not going to be able to stand working for them. Awesome list. I recently experienced number 2 where the interviewer was telling me how budgets work at my current position at a place she only knows in passing. Not only was she very wrong, but I'm the budget person in my department, so I know exactly how wrong she is. This came up when she was annoyed that I didn't fill out my salary requirements on the job app for a position with 0 salary information posted. She said they needed that information from me because they have a limited budget, unlike where I currently work. Spoiler alert, my department's broke and my salary's paid on soft money. We're the exact opposite of rolling in the dough. She followed this up with, and we don't want to break any hearts, which was almost about as obnoxious as refusing to give me any kind of hint about their budgeted range for the position. So it was all about me trying to be psychic and guess a number that she felt was appropriate, while also being a number that I felt was appropriate. In the end, they didn't offer me the job, and I'm glad, since the interviews, 2, both 15 minutes or more late on their end, I've heard that woman's name come up from someone who currently works at that place. Surprise, surprise, no one has anything good to say about her. Bullet dodged. Interviewer. How well do you handle conflict, such as if you work with someone who might yell a lot? Me? Well, I don't think anyone should yell at someone while working. Interviewer. Your direct report has a history of being passionate about his work. Oftentimes he raises his voice and it might make people uncomfortable. Red flag, run! My last boss specifically ended the interview, which he did himself, by saying that he was a gigantic butthole and that people hate to work for him, and would I be able to work under a boss like him? I eagerly agreed in a way that still sickens me to this day. And I paid for it because he was a man of his word. In fact, if anything, he was subtle and subdued in that interview. He was downplaying what a massive C-word he was. Frick you, Gene. Okay, I've had some unpleasant bosses in my past. Maybe I would have saved a lot of time if some of them had told me up front that they were just absolute buttholes. Last interview I went to, they told me they were going to be bigger than Facebook. The company had 6 Facebook likes and a web page smothered with errors, and got angry at me when I suggested some easy 1-minute steps to fix them. It was for a tech company. You could have just finished with, "We're going to be bigger than Facebook." Did they tell you that they couldn't meet your salary requirements, but would make up for it with stock options? They always seem to have a terrible vesting schedule as well, to the point that you know the company won't be in business long enough to actually vest your options, which I'm sure is not an accident. So, how's the work-life balance here? Followed by laughter from them. This question triggered a big green flag from my current employer. They said that they were really flexible with scheduling, and I could make my own hours as long as they occurred between 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., and that I would receive a few weeks' notice if my hours were going to ramp up for any reason. Really one of the biggest reasons I'm still here. My current job is like that. I asked about the start time and they were like, most people start at 9 a.m., but as long as you get your time in, we don't really care when you're here. The vacation policy for salaried employees is something like, write the days that you'll be gone on a big calendar so we know when not to bug you. Granted, they expect about 55 hours a week, but coming from a job where I was written up for coming in 30 minutes early so I could leave 30 minutes early, never mind being on call 24/7, it's very much a perk. The biggest danger, screaming red warning flag was when I asked about work-life balance and specifically, what's the day-to-day look like? Apparently all the devs started at 11 or 12 and they were there until 8 to 9, indicating 0 families, home lives, girlfriends, or anything else important in their lives that isn't working that kind of schedule. I ended the interview as quick as I could after that. Sure beats 7 to 9.
The guys interviewing me took me out to dinner, then went back to the office for a few more hours. One of them had a newborn at home. Right after I graduated, I interviewed for an entry-level data entry or admin position. They offered to hire me if I paid them $750 to complete their training course. Ugh. Oh boy, I've got a list. The interviewer had me stand against the wall while he rated me on my wardrobe. Father-son operation. The two interviewed me, argued a bit over stuff in front of me. Employee manual of one company, I don't know why they gave it to me at the interview, but they did. When the employee is no longer useful to the company, the employee and company must part ways. Italian firm getting started in the US, the interviewer actually excused himself to go fondle the secretary. Googling the firm netted a few links to OSHA violations and deaths. Facebook page of one employee talking about his life on an oil derrick in the Gulf of Mexico. Travel percentage kept changing wildly in the interview. Panel interview, a few folks got up halfway through. Very vague questions about qualifications, mostly about me. Generic skills test and then a DISC assessment. This is a 110% job. You'll also be expected to work at least 2 weekends a month. I'm encountering a series of red flags right now. So far I've had 5 rounds, yes, 5, of interviews for a mid-level managerial job. All but one of which were rescheduled by the company at the last minute due to conflicts with the various interviewers. I finally reached the final round with a senior executive a couple of days ago, only to have that person show up in an annoyed huff and announce that they had only just now received my resume. They then went on to say, and I quote, "I don't even know why they're considering you for this role." They then followed up with this gem, "Which of our offices is this for again?" Needless to say, after all that rigmarole, I plan on turning down the offer if they send one. We work hard and play hard. Bullcrap. You just work hard and have awkward social get-togethers at most once a month. This isn't Wall Street. All that's going to happen is that you're going to make me work 60 hours a week because of this mentality. I work at a supermarket where we work long shifts, and then once a year we have a Christmas do so loud and out of hand that we've been banned from several pubs and clubs. Actually telling me about any obligatory playing corporate activities. Guys, I came here to work. I already have a family to spend my life with. I'm not going to substitute my life for you. You may be a part of my life, don't try to grab the whole life. I work for the Air Force. They love to have mandatory fun times. Everyone hates it. Want us to have fun? Give us the afternoon to spend with our families. I already spend more time with my coworkers than the people I love. Interview at a landscaping company. I commented on how nice all the plants were and what a relaxing environment the office must be. The interviewer laughed nervously and said, "It's not really." Then I met the boss and was talking about how I work well with my past managers, and he said, "And what if your manager is a difficult person who yells a lot?" He was referring to himself, and I knew it, but I was desperate and needed the job. Luckily, I left after 3 months. I had a boss describe himself as sometimes acting a little bipolar. Not to mention his wife worked for him, so they would have screaming matches from their offices and be really passive-aggressive. So glad not to be there anymore. Anyone who asks you how you handle someone who's bipolar or yell a lot is a huge freaking red flag. Oh god, is there really any worse combination than being trapped in a toxic workplace and in the middle of a toxic relationship? Glad you got out of that place. During an interview, my future boss mentioned that my predecessors flaked out after a day and 2 weeks, respectively. Turns out they didn't flake, he's just a massive butthole. I lasted 5 months. Went for a marketing executive role, turned up to the office, and it was almost totally bare except for 8 or 9 mismatched chairs. We were called into a side office for an interview. The central heating wasn't working, so the interviewer was wearing gloves and a winter jacket. When he mentioned it was commission-only pay, I walked straight out. Beware the Cobra Group. They are mainly just charity fundraisers who give their jobs outrageously misleading titles, like marketing executive. Also applicable if you live in Scotland is a group called Meraki Rose. Noticed a few of their adverts for similarly titled jobs in marketing and sales, saying you don't need experience or even a degree in a related field. They're basically telling you to do one of those jobs where you stand in the high street and try to sell insurance to passers-by. Again, commission only, and they make you do unpaid work at the start as training. Plus, specific info on them and in the job adverts is very hard to come by, and everything is vague, which is also a big red flag as far as I'm concerned. Being left waiting for half an hour for the interviewer. I picked up my bag and walked out. I once was left for 45 minutes with the receptionist, whom I talked to a bit, and this was in undergrad, and I'd never had a job before, so I was desperate. The interviewer, when I walked out, grabbed my resume from the receptionist, looked at it, and then said, "Okay, we'll call you if you get it." I didn't get it. I originally wondered if this was some kind of weird twist interview where they were just trying to assess how I would interact with the receptionist, but I honestly don't think they're that smart. So then, why the heck call me in for an interview if you've gathered from my resume that you don't want me? I just don't get it. You never know what kind of things companies will do as part of their interview process. It isn't uncommon for interviewers to talk to the receptionist to see how you've behaved. Be nice to the receptionist. If the receptionist says you acted like a prick, you'll almost never get hired. I can't remember who it was, perhaps Henry Ford or George Westinghouse, but I recall reading about how this famous business leader used to interview potential executives. As part of the interview, they'd go to lunch. If the candidate salted his food without tasting it first, he wouldn't be hired. The reasoning is that since he didn't taste the food first, he didn't know if it needed extra salt. He was dismissed as unthinking. The moral of the story is, once again, that some employers use unusual tests on job applicants. Be on your best behavior. I once caused a red flag for a person being interviewed. I worked at an IT help desk for a retail chain, and the people who called in could get pretty abusive on the phone. A new guy was being interviewed for the help desk team in a cubicle next to me, and I was on with a particularly nasty caller. So I turned up the volume loud enough so he could hear her cussing me out the whole time. I didn't overhear the whole interview, but I knew he declined their offer. Of course, from his end, this was a huge red flag. He's watching me do the job he'll soon be doing and getting cussed and treated horribly the whole time. It was my way of saying, get out while you can. I saw one of those ads that said work for students, $15 an hour or something. I called the number and set up an interview. Should have known not to interview for a job you don't have to apply for. I got there and it was this crappy building downtown with flickering fluorescent lights. They brought me to a room not unlike a doctor's waiting room where several other people sat filling out papers. I was skeptical but needed a job, so I started filling out my paperwork. When I flipped the page over, I finally saw the name of the company I was applying to, Vector Marketing. I only knew about them because a friend of mine sold Cutco knives for a while. I crumpled up the paper and left without a word. I went in for an interview with Vector once and it was absolutely hilarious. First off, the bullcrap started before I even walked in the door. I told them on the phone that I wasn't interested in a sales position, but would be down to interview for an office job. When I got there, they said that there weren't any office jobs, but I could interview for sales. They just lied to get me in the door. At this point, I wasn't going to take a job even if I got it, I just wanted to stay and watch the crap show. Now, as I walk in, and even more so as I went through the process, I realize exactly what kind of company this place is. As you walk in the door, you see a very nice reception area, and then look behind it and it's this big bare room with a bunch of chairs and a projector screen. As they sign me in and everything, I realize why this place looks only half built. They only built or decorated exactly as much as they needed. See, the entire building is designed with the flow of their con in mind. You walk in and are stopped at reception, which looks nice and legit. An attractive girl hands you an application and directs you down the hall to the waiting area. Once your turn comes, you're led into the interview office, which had part or all of one wall missing, not gone, just never built. After the interview, if you chose to continue and they chose to let you, you're escorted to what I only assume was the indoctrination zone. I left after the interview, so I don't know exactly. This was a large, entirely unfinished portion of the building. No decorations or anything, just a projector and chairs. This was the most insulting part, as it made it clear that their intentions were for everything to seem professional and on the up and up until we accepted a position, at which point they no longer cared about our opinion of their facilities. But yeah, they literally just built just enough walls to facilitate their scheme, no more, no less. They literally don't even bother trying to hide how little effort they put into it. You can even see that final warehousey room from the reception area, as they couldn't even put up enough walls to hide it. Another amusing thing was the interview. They were clearly using psychological tactics to bully kids into agreeing to work for them. For instance, the interviewer was extremely tall, and the desk and chair were huge, while the chair they gave me was short and uncomfortable. If I'd been the same height as the interviewer, I would still have been at least a foot below him sitting like that. In my memory, it's almost like King Yemma's desk from Dragon Ball Z. It was clear that they set it up so that the interviewer would be extremely imposing, and became even more clear when I started asking questions and the interviewer was originally very annoyed and pushy. They definitely set it up so that the interviewer could bully poor kids into joining, as that was definitely what they were trying with me. Not surprisingly, the interviewer became a nervous wreck once he realized I wasn't going to fold anytime soon.
Well, initially you'll be a contractor, but there's opportunities for full-time employment in the future. My job involves managing an unemployment database. The amount this happens, especially for students, is astounding. Unpaid internship, 25 hours a week on a 6-month contract. Possibility of employment in the future. It's utterly disgusting how companies attempt to, and do, get away with working students the equivalent of a part-time job or more for free, and lie to them that they might actually hire them in the future. Students need to stand up against unpaid internships and refuse to take them, nationwide.
Yep, I'm sad to say that I've fallen for a few of those ads and applied for a few of those kinds of jobs when I was a student. Oh well, you live and learn.
Question: what kind of workload can I expect on the average week? I've heard horror stories of 80-hour weeks at big companies. Answer: let's not beat around the bush. All companies expect a 50 to 60-hour week. They don't say they do, but they do. Get right out of there. I'm very happy at my current job that doesn't even require me to answer emails outside of the 40 hours I work. I would gladly work 50 hours a week as long as I was A, paid time and a half for it, and B, given a schedule that actually gets followed.
I think in any interview you want to ask questions about the company when it comes time for you to ask questions. 1. You want to specifically ask about the culture. Maybe ask the interviewer what they think about the culture. 2. Ask what kind of turnaround the company has. Low turnover probably means a good environment. 3. Ask the interviewer what they like most about working at the company. Pay attention to their body language and their answer. They're probably not going to be honest if they hate it, but you might be able to tell. If they tell you that they don't like it, that's a huge red flag. When I was first looking into an office IT position, I was in an interview when someone knocked on the office door, asked a question, and left. After he left, the interviewer told me, "That's the person we're going to fire when you get this job." Gave me a bad vibe, so I turned down the offer when I got it. Joke of an offer too, $21K a year. I was making $40K a year working in retail. Things I've encountered. Bad-mouthing other applicants. Not by name, but still not cool. Didn't even look at your resume before they offered you an interview. Then mentioning they didn't even look at your resume before offering you an interview. Offered you an interview, again, before they even looked at your resume, for a position you don't have experience or skills in. The good old gem, the pay sucks and the hours are long, but the work is great. Bad-mouthing other facilities or businesses in the same field. Group interviews where you're expected to give your answer in front of 8 or 9 other candidates. I've probably encountered other red flags, but these were the ones which stuck out the most for me. A thing called knowledge fishing. I interviewed for a building company in the UK for a marketing executive. They wanted to branch into residential builds from a large commercial network, but the marketing manager said they had no idea how to go about it at that stage. Well, I went through the interview process and did my best, then I got a message from them about a week later that I was through to the next stage. However, they wanted me to give them a full presentation of what I think their whole marketing strategy should be for every area, including social media and online marketing, and they wanted a full hour on each part. They ended the letter by saying, "Don't worry, we have a marketing plan. We just want to see if your thoughts are similar to ours." Ding ding ding, bigger red flag than at the end of the first act of Les Miserables. It's worth reiterating that this was a marketing executive, not a marketing director or anything huge like that. I told them I wasn't interested and left it at that. It was pretty obvious they wanted my input to make their marketing proposal, rather than to offer an actual job, especially as their letter stated something completely different to what the manager had told me. I know that this was a knowledge fishing job too, as I was talking to another agency about this and they told me that they've barred this company from working with them for doing exactly this before. In conclusion, company wanted me to do a huge presentation to them. Turned out they were fishing for ideas to implement without having an actual job to offer. Pre-interview, but if a company's website is tailored towards recruiting new employees way more than it is towards clients, it's a bad sign. A real reputable company that is making money wants their website to be client-facing first, and have a tab or link somewhere for careers for those who are interested. If 50% or more of the main landing page is catered towards selling you on why they're such a good career choice, it's either A, a scam, or B, a meat grinder business where the turnover is extremely high, or C, a company that has no idea what it's doing.
Redditors who have been kidnapped. What was your experience like? Are there things you do now that you would have never done before? Serious replies only. My father, quote, kidnapped me when I was 7, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I lived with my alcoholic mother and her insane boyfriend. I wasn't abused physically, but looking back, the mental abuse and neglect was very traumatic. Some borderline child called it things. Anyways, my father had visitation rights and picked me up every other weekend. One weekend, he came to get me and saw that I had not eaten much. Food was almost always under lock and key, and my mom and her boyfriend were nowhere to be found. So, my father told me, pack your stuff. We spent some time hiding out at different places with family, friends, even hotels in Laughlin and Vegas. It was like a mini vacation. I even remember staying at my dad's girlfriend's house when the cops showed up. I hid under the bed while they talked to her. At the end of the day, I never had to go back to my mom's boyfriend's house, and my father won majority custody. I'm not sure how I would have turned out if I had stayed there. Thanks, Dad. When I was maybe 10 or 11, my neighbor kidnapped me. She was this single woman in her 50s who was always super nice to me. She was always on her porch, and she'd wave when I came home from school. Anyway, I was walking home from school and she was waving as usual, but this time she was beckoning me over. I went up to her porch and she asked me if I wanted some meatloaf she made. I freaking loved meatloaf, and she seemed harmless, so I said yes. I expected her to come outside with a plate or something, but instead, she called me in and told me to sit downstairs. I felt weird about it, but I followed her into her basement and sat down on a couch. She brought me a plate of meatloaf and I watched Pokemon 2000 on VHS. She had a freezer with those tube popsicle things too. After I ate, I told her I needed to go home, and she told me my parents called and asked her to keep me while they ran errands. I felt weird about it and suspected she was lying, but I just kind of went along with it. I remember I asked her if I could get my Game Boy at one point from my house, and she said my parents told me not to let me out of her sight. I remember watching Men in Black and falling asleep. When I woke up, I tried leaving, but the door was locked. She left some banana pudding for me on the table for when I woke up, so I just had that and went back to sleep. She opened the door at like 5 in the morning, woke me up, and asked me if I wanted to go home. She looked like she'd been crying. I told her yes, and she let me go. My parents asked me where I was, and I just told them I went home with a friend after school. I didn't have a cell phone, so it was pretty normal for me to just be gone for a day. I didn't see my neighbor on her porch the next Monday, so I knocked on her door. She came outside, and we talked on the porch about stuff. We never talked about that night, and she probably thought I didn't even realize what happened. She didn't say, but I think she had a kid who died a couple years prior and wanted to fill the gap. I never hated her for it or anything. Until I moved a couple years later, I would sit on her porch after school most days, and she listened to my neat facts about space. My sisters and I were kidnapped by our father repeatedly between the ages of 2 and 4. He would take us from our mother. She had brain damage and a serious drug problem, beat us if we made noise, and lock us in a closet and forget to feed us for days at a time. Each kidnapping lasted between 2 weeks and 6 months, depending on how long it took for my mother to realize we were gone and ask for help. He was a very scary man. He just wanted money from the state, food stamps and welfare. He would also try to get money out of my maternal grandmother. In fact, she's the only reason the cops kept getting involved in trying to locate him. She had money and influence, and used it. I don't remember much because I was so young, but I remember being scared, and in pain, and a uniformed cop opening a door and letting light in. I was terrified of being locked in the dark for years after, and sandy-haired men with mustaches still can make me very nervous. I'm 41 now. When I got divorced, my kids were almost the exact same age as my sisters and I were when the kidnapping started. It was a struggle to keep those old fears in check. I posted this on a different account I don't remember the password for. This is a long one, but it gets good. 2 years ago, I was very hungover on a summer Saturday in Manhattan. A girl I was seeing at the time was angrily getting her things together and proceeded to storm out of the apartment, which was shared by myself and 4 other guys. My old roommates had moved to a new apartment the night before. There are boxes and miscellaneous crap everywhere. I'm laying in bed, dying. It's around 9 or 10 a.m. About 5 minutes after the girl storms out, there's a knock at the door. She must have forgotten her phone charger or something. I get up in my boxers, walk across the living room where all the unpacked and half-packed crap is, and open up the door. Behind the door was one of the scariest faces I've ever seen. Very beady eyes, thick mustache, scarred-up face, balding man in his 50s. I was holding the door slightly ajar. Since it wasn't who I thought it was, I stepped behind the door a bit to hide my pale body and stuck my head through the crack. He asked if Billy was home, one of my old roommates. I told him that Billy had moved out the day before. With that said, he put all of his body weight into the door, sending me flying back. This dude was enormous. As I was recovering from this and trying to think why someone would be so angry with Billy, this gentleman open-hand slapped me so hard I hit the ground. I am now awake. My new house guest identifies himself as Big Tony and demands to speak with Billy. I go into my room, right off of the living room where Big Tony is now setting up shop, and put on pants and grab my phone. Tony has already made it very clear not to call the police or try to run out of my apartment, or I might fall out of the window or get shot in the knees. Apparently, Billy owes him a lot of money. I call Billy, who says he's never heard of Big Tony, and Billy is convinced it's a joke. Tony asks for the phone, where I hear Billy telling Big Tony to go screw himself and to get out of his old apartment. Tony is now upset and starts telling Billy that his roommate, myself, might get hurt if he doesn't learn some manners and come to the old apartment. Billy hangs up. Tony, for some reason, took a liking to me. He apologized for the slap, gave me cigarettes, and said he hoped that this would all work out. He constantly comments on the fact that I'm living like an animal since there's stuff all over the apartment, and asking if me and my old roomies watch betting sports. We never watched sports, never had cable. He asks if Billy's last name is something, which it isn't, then asks if Billy is from somewhere, that he isn't, and then asked if Billy is enrolled in a university, that he isn't. I inform Big Tony that I'm fairly confident he is in the wrong apartment. Just as I'm getting him to back off and believe that there might be more than one Billy living in an apartment building, there was another knock at the door. Quote, "If it's the cops or your parents, I'm the maintenance guy." My parents were coming to help me move out that afternoon. I open the door and it's Henry, another one of my old roommates. I inform him he's picked a bad time as he's already waltzing inside to get some things. Tony poses as my uncle for a few minutes before I intervene and tell Henry that this giant man is looking for Billy, who he believes owes him money. "Henry, do you guys gamble?" "Yeah, we gamble all the time." We play dice and cards a lot. I try explaining to Tony that we don't gamble on sports, but now we have to go through the whole gambit again. After another half hour of questions with Henry, Tony is back to believing he is in the wrong apartment. He calls his quote coworker to get a picture texted to him. It's not Billy. Okay. I tell Tony good luck and try to shoo him out of the apartment. No, it's never that easy. Tony wishes to take Henry and I out for coffee and donuts, his personal apology. I refuse. He won't have it. I'm in a Starbucks ordering donuts and coffee, which we consume in a nearby park, and listen to Tony's stories. Half an hour later, he says we can leave. At this point, it didn't seem like we were being kept though, and we head back. Naturally, no one believes us. We have a party in the old/pretty empty apartment. I stay at a friend's place in the building and wake up to knocks. Straight up Nom flashbacks. It's my buddy Tom, who also lives in the building. He tells me someone's outside looking for me. Great. I get dressed and head outside to find Big Tony, who gives me a grocery bag filled with beer and cigarettes. Tom and a few other friends from the building come outside and we drink beer in styrofoam cups on the street whilst listening to Tony's stories. Everyone believes Henry and I, and if I'm ever in Tony's neighborhood, I should call him for dinner on him. TLDR, I got Big Lebowski'd. This happened a while ago when I was 6. I come from a third world country, and at the time, kidnappings were at an all-time high. We lived in a fairly nice neighborhood, no kidnappings there, no theft, great neighbors. We felt pretty safe, and therefore, my mom wasn't too worried. Our house was a gated residence, so we had a front yard and a backyard. I was out one morning in the front yard, playing with some toys while my mom was inside working or cooking or whatever. Someone knocked on the front gate. Me, being a dumb child, decided to go up and ask who it was. It was this fairly old man who asked for some water. Me, being the nice helping child, opened the door and was snatched immediately. I don't particularly remember what happened after that, but I woke up in a compound which I'm pretty sure was far from home. They hadn't done anything bad to me as far as I know, but they did try to feed me food that I didn't like. I was a picky child, and so all I ate was fruit. They had asked for ransom, which to this day I don't know how much it was. They just kept me in a room all day with duct tape on my mouth and ropes around my feet and hands. They did take the duct tape off to let me drink water or eat food. Anyways, a few days later, the police busted them and arrested them. They ended up in jail for life is what I was told. Not too long after that, my parents decided to move to a different country and now all is well. I still think about what might have gone wrong if they had sold me into child slavery or something, fairly common in my country. Life resumed after that. I'm as happy as a 20-year-old can be. Nothing really changed. I still don't know why I was kidnapped, maybe for ransom or whatever. In exactly a month, it'll be my 14th kidnapping anniversary. Not much like the other stories here, but my ex-boyfriend abducted me from my parents' home when I was 19, threw me in the trunk of his car and drove off. About 8 hours later, a lot happened in between, including me getting out of the trunk and into the back seat. The police spotted his car and engaged in a high-speed pursuit. He crashed into a tree, served about 4 years, and is out with a wife and 3 kids now. It didn't affect me as much as people expected it to, and I haven't really changed anything in my life because of it. It happened in the past, and that's how I view it. My mother kidnapped me. My parents were in the middle of an ugly divorce and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Since she depended on my father for money, she assumed she would lose me in the custody battle. My mother is a dual Canadian and American citizen. My father is American. So one day when my dad was at work, she didn't send me to school and took me from USA to Canada. There was nothing my dad could do because we weren't in the USA. It was several months before my mom decided to do the quote, right thing and go back to the States. By that time, my dad has lawyered up so well, she basically lost all rights to parenting me. This happened when I was 6 to 7. My mother ended up moving back to Canada to be with her family. If I could go back, I would have begged my mom not to return to the States. What the courts didn't care to hear was that my dad was a quote, functioning alcoholic. He was abusive in every way. When my parents divorced, my mom couldn't afford to live in the USA. So I was raised by my abusive father for another decade until I moved out at 17. He had me too terrified to tell anyone, just like my mom was. I'm now 28 and trying to build positive relationships with both my parents now that I've forgiven both of them. TLDR, mom kidnapped me and took me from USA to Canada. Several months later, mom felt guilty and returned me to the USA. So back when I was around 7 or 8, my family went to visit our home country of Pakistan. Anytime someone from the USA comes and visits Pakistan, it's kind of a big deal depending on where you're going. Where we visited was a small village of maybe 200 or so people, and so word gets out fast that, quote, rich Americans are coming. This makes us targets, as people believe we come with pockets full of treasures and gold and money. Anyways, I'm with my cousin, who at the time was also 8, at a sketchy arcade place. Sketchy because it only had like 3 games, and it was located in the back of a beat-up mini-store. So I'm playing, and my cousin tells me it's time to go, but I was so into the game that I didn't want to go. He leaves, and I stayed. As I'm playing, these 2 guys come into the arcade room and just start watching me play and start giving me comments on how good I was. And when I responded back in English, not the native language of Punjabi, so they knew I was an American. Next thing I know, they grab me by the hands and tell me to come with them. All I remember is crying while they drag me in the daylight in front of other people to some house. Once at the location, an old lady, who I assume was their mother, was frantic and asking who I am and why I was crying and why I was there. The guys told her to pretty much shut up and threw me into a room. I remember just standing at the door of the room and banging and crying for what seemed like hours, and every now and then they would tell me to shut up or they would hurt me, but I kept crying and banging. After what seemed like many hours, the woman/mom opened the door and told me to run home. I booked it so fast out of there, but I had no clue where I was. I just ran, and whenever I would see a kid or a woman, I would ask where the arcade was because I knew how to get home from there. Pakistan is notorious for what they do to little kids, especially young boys. Young boys are used for trafficking, and so, reflecting back on this incident, I would say I was one lucky kid, because God knows where I would be today. I met a man online who was around my parents' age. He pelted me with compliments and told me how pretty I was and everything a teenage girl wants to hear. I met him in secret every other weekend for 3 months. I would tell my parents I was staying at a friend's house, and then he and I would get a hotel room for the weekend. He started getting really controlling, bordering on physically abusive, so after a particularly harsh fight, I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. A few months later, he showed up at my job as I was leaving and told me he wanted me to come to his house, 2 hours away, so we could talk about stuff. I told him I had nothing to say to him and tried to leave. He told me he had recorded us in bed, and if that I didn't go with him, he would make sure my parents, my siblings, and my boss got a copy of it. That we were just going to talk so he could explain why he acted the way he had. I was terrified of my parents finding out that I'd been lying and sleeping with a guy their age, so I went with him. He made me drive his car there, probably because we had to go through a toll booth with a camera and it would look less against my will if I was the one driving. We got to his house and he immediately turned violent. He shoved me into his room and locked the door. He ended up keeping me there for a week. During that time, he pretended to be my father and called in to work for me. He made me sign on to all of my accounts online, email, AIM, MySpace. He had a keylogger set up on his computer, so now he had all of my passwords. He took my phone the moment we got to his house. He wrote a quote, script, and had me call nearly everyone in my phone and tell them that I didn't want to be friends with them anymore and never to contact me again. One day, he took me for a drive to this park bordering a river and told me that that was where he was going to bury me. That night, I started actively fighting back. Prior to that, I thought he was just going to let me go eventually. I kicked him in the testicles and hit him in the face, but that only made him mad, and he shoved me on the bed and knelt on my back with my hands behind my back while screaming at me and whacking me in the side of the head. He was so ticked off that night that he used my phone and called my dad around 6 in the morning and left him a voicemail saying, "You don't know where your daughter really is or what she's been up to, and you never will." My dad called my phone probably 20 to 30 times. The guy eventually was afraid he'd tell the police, so he had me answer and told me to tell my dad it was all a joke. He sat pretty much on top of me and told me if he caught me trying to tell him where I was, he would kill me. I told my dad my friends and I had been drinking and it was one of my friends' idea of a prank. When I was little, I had this friend who I would play with, but she always wanted me to spend the night and would pressure me into calling and asking my parents. My dad came up with a trick where he would ask me, "Are you going to watch wrestling tonight?" And if I said yes, it meant I wanted to stay. If I said no, it meant I wanted him to say I could not stay. At the end of our phone call, for the first time in probably 10 years, he asked, "Are you going to watch wrestling tonight?" And I said no. When we hung up, he called the police and called all of my friends that he could get a hold of. He eventually called the one friend who I had told about this guy, and he had all of his info, name, phone number, everything. Within 24 hours, I was safe at home, confessed everything to everyone, got a bunch of phone calls from friends who were confused and worried, and everything worked out. I never ever go anywhere without multiple people knowing where I'll be and who I'm with. I carry pepper spray and a self-defense weapon, and I never met another person online. I'm 31 now, and it's still something I think about more often than I like to. I was a victim of parental kidnapping as a child. It was terrifying because I knew the situation was wrong and I shouldn't have been with my mother, but even when I could put together words to say that, I was scolded because, no, that's your mother. Your mother can't kidnap you. It was one of many events that made me lose all faith in, quote, authority figures. Since it happened when I was young, I don't do anything different in my life as an adult, but I do get very annoyed when people complain about having to sign out their kid from daycare and facing any sort of hurdles when taking their kid out of school or daycare early. Familial kidnapping is real and could be as traumatizing, if not more so, than stranger kidnapping. I was lucky that mom just wanted her sympathy ticket. I was forced to march in front of a BOV, an armored personnel carrier, with 20 other people who had been rounded up by the VRS, the Army of the Republika Srpska. We marched in camp with them for 2 weeks and were used as human shields around vehicles and outposts. About 4 of us were shot, and 3 of us had died before I was taken to give stitches to some sort of officer who had a gash in his leg, and I was able to negotiate my release and the release of one woman who I had marched with, who was also able to pay. I wouldn't say I do things differently now, but it drained the life out of me completely at the time. Any desire I had before that to stay and ride the war out was totally gone. To this day, I have an extremely derisive attitude towards war and resent those who start them. Used to go running in my area when I was in high school. I've had older men offer me rides and follow me around, driving really slow back and forth past me, giving me the creeper eyes. I've even had women try and offer me into their car. One guy in a crappy rusty red van followed me for 20 minutes. I remember the look in his eyes, leaning back into his car, shirtless. I remember crossing the road several times and he kept making U-turns. I eventually faked crossing the road at one point and jumped a brick wall into this guy's yard. A huge dog came running out to meet me. I chose the dog versus the guy. The dog ran up to me to attack and simply licked me. An old dude came outside and I told him about it. I helped him work on his old Jaguar for hours before I felt safe to run home. Also, I'm a guy, and this was when I was 16 to 17 years old. I can't imagine how a woman may feel. I just got my concealed weapons permit and I'm working on getting my GF hers. Screw creepers. I am Peter Moore, the longest held hostage in Iraq, kept captive for over 2.5 years. In April of 2007, I accepted a 3-month posting in Iraq working for the American IT consulting firm Bearing Point. I arrived in Baghdad on the 2nd of April 2007, where my main job was to develop spending reports from the computer system used within the Ministry of Finance. On the 29th of May 2007, around 100 Iraqi police officers from the Ministry of Interior entered the building and took away myself and 4 British guards. For 6 months, I was moved around, meeting up with the British guards. In December of 2007, I was separated from the other Britons and was held with 2 Americans. In June of 2007, I was transported back to Baghdad, and this was the last time I had contact with any of the other hostages. In May of 2009, the number 2 commander of the militia, Laith al-Khazali, was released from U.S. custody in exchange for the bodies of 2 of the British guards. In September, over 100 militia were released in exchange for the body of one of the guards. On the 30th of December 2009, 946 days, or 2 years, 7 months, and 1 day, after I was captured, I was released in exchange for the militia leader Qais al-Khazali. The last of the hostages' bodies were eventually handed over in early 2012.
What's your in-laws from hell story? Husband took his own life. In-laws took me to court over insurance money. Most insurance policies don't pay out in the event of someone taking their own life. However, SGLI through the military will pay out in almost all circumstances. I'm doing well these days and I haven't heard from them in a few years. There was a lot of harassment before it actually made it in front of a judge. Forged signatures on beneficiary update forms that were magically found after his death and hadn't ever been filed. It was thrown out pretty quickly, but not before lots of headaches and money down the drain to a thankfully great attorney. Obviously, they were crazy before this, but it really was the cherry on top. His dad was obsessed with trying to catch us doing the deed, going so far as having his own key cut for our house. He had our keys one day when he was waiting in for a workman for us. He would just barge in at any time, never knocked on doors, tried to often barge into the bathroom when it was being used, also liked me to catch him pleasuring himself, would wait until he knew we were a few minutes away. We often called them to let them know we were nearly there, and then he'd whip it out and go to town and looked me dead in the eye when I caught him. Creepiest man alive. We changed the locks and reduced contacts. When partner and I split, he called me several times to offer a shoulder to cry on. No, thank you. The in-laws have been going through a rough time financially for a while, and my wife and I have been paying their credit card and parent loan for a couple of years. Father-in-law's parents passed this year, and he gets a large but not massive inheritance, around $75,000. We keep paying the bills because father-in-law is still not working full-time and he puts the inheritance away, so mother-in-law, who is horribly irresponsible with the money, can't access it. We just arrived on Christmas Eve and there's a Lexus sitting in the garage, paid for in cash, and now father-in-law is talking about how he wants a Cadillac. I'm so teed off that I haven't been able to sleep, and I don't want to frick up the holidays, so I'm biting my tongue until we leave, but there is no way we're paying the bills anymore.
$5 says they'll react with, "But we need it! How can you be so selfish?" Don't cave. Remember how much that car cost. Remember they were saying in front of you, payer of their fricking bills, that they want a Cadillac. There's an important saying that one should never ascribe to malice what can be explained by stupidity, and I think that probably applies here. Hopefully they saw reason and accepted the solution with grace. My mother wore all black to our wedding, complete with a black hat with a hanging black mesh to cover her face like she was in mourning. This made me laugh. So melodramatic. Does she always act like this?
I'm low-key in love with passive-aggressive antics from family. My entire extended family is so melodramatic, I'm running out of popcorn. After driving almost 11 hours with husband to see in-laws, mother-in-law accused me of
keeping her son away from her,
and how I'm
not ever going to let her see her son again,
to my face and started crying in front of multiple adults and children. The next day, when I asked to speak with her to let her know that what she did was a little unreasonable and very hurtful to me, she showed her true colors and went from crying victim to screaming viciously at me and trying to hit me. She screamed me and husband, her son, out of the house and threw the gifts we had bought her out of the door like pieces of trash. I cannot believe this is the woman who gave birth to my husband. She's like she's from another species.
She sounds slightly mentally unstable.
She just sounds very manipulative, playing the victim for the audience and getting mad when she realizes she's not getting what she wants. My mother-in-law said we could have the wedding at the place she works, for free, otherwise the venue would cost upwards of $7,000 just to rent out. She decided that gave her free license to plan everything to her specifications, including the date, what we would eat, the flowers, what we would drink, and even what music I'd have at my wedding. She invited more people to the wedding than me and my husband combined. To top it off, she refused to watch my husband's son on our wedding night, saying that he would feel rejected if he wasn't allowed to stay with us. Each thing happened by itself, and it wasn't until they all added up that I realized my wedding had been hijacked under the guise of,
"That's how it needs to be if you're going to have it at my place of work,"
which was bullcrap. She just wanted to control everything. My husband called her out on it later, and she's reduced her meddling to almost zero now. Thank goodness.
This happened to me exactly. She always used to ask, I'm divorced now, Why we didn't have wedding photos displayed. Because I hated being reminded of that day never seemed like a very nice response. My soon-to-be mother-in-law devoted an inordinate amount of time petitioning the state to allow her son to be remanded into her custody for a day to attend my wedding. He was in jail awaiting trial for fighting a cop and nurse after getting picked up for drunk and disorderly. He was denied bail because he was currently on probation from previous alcohol-fueled shenanigans, theft and assault, and was looking at a nickel once he finally got a court date. She wouldn't listen to my wife and I when we asked her to stop, so we had to write our own letter to the Department of Corrections letting them know we would have an open bar at the reception and it would be a really bad idea if my brother-in-law was in attendance. We showed him pictures and videos 4 years later when he got out, the first time. Fun fact, my brother-in-law is the reason I'm on first-name basis with the local sheriffs in his hometown, as for the first 3 years I dated his sister, there wasn't a family function that he, the brother-in-law, attended where they didn't get called out. Out of curiosity, how's the brother-in-law doing now? Today he's walking around on parole as a convicted felon, carrying the balance of a 20-year sentence over his head, and someone is waiting for him to break parole. The problem is that he's definitely got a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. When he's sober, he's one of the kindest, most generous, and most noble human beings you'll ever meet. But as soon as he starts drinking, it's all downhill from there. One of the first times I ever met him, he literally, as in took it off and handed it to me, gave me the shirt off his back so that I could make a good impression on their grandparents. He then proceeded to get so drunk that emergency services had to be called, which set the tone for the next 15 years of our brother's by-marriage relationship. I care deeply for the guy and do what I can to help him and his kids, but he doesn't have my home address for a reason. To answer the original question, he's getting his next 30-day chip next week, and we're all really proud of him. Again, I personally am hoping he sticks with it this time. This isn't as out there as some of the overtly rude in-laws, but mine were so utterly self-absorbed, insular, and lacking in social skills that I was literally ignored throughout most of my early encounters with them. They had a family culture which they all buy into, in which my father-in-law is the center of everything. The only family pictures in the house were of him, none of the 3 kids, all food was prepared to his tastes, and he had no concept of other people's needs or feelings. Initially, I felt utterly rejected and disapproved of, because who goes to dinner again and again with people and is never asked one question, not even, "How are you?" It took me a long time to realize that they just had no idea how to interact with other people because they lived in this complete bubble. To this day, my father-in-law treats every conversation as an opportunity to change the topic to himself, no matter how outside of his experience it is. But I realize that they never cared enough about me to bother to disapprove of me. That being said, my father-in-law's levels of narcissism are so great that he sees slights and digs at him in a lot of my Facebook posts and unfriends me because he couldn't bear the idea that I wasn't considering his feelings with every thought I shared. As he's so accustomed to everyone catering to his needs all the time. I'm sure I was supposed to be wounded to have no longer been in his good graces, but I just laughed. I think he is genuinely and cluelessly taken aback when he's not considered the most important and greatest person in the room. My mother-in-law refers to all of her daughters-in-law as son's first wife. She gave me used stationery for Christmas. Want more? She wore a white dress to my brother-in-law's wedding rehearsal dinner and interrupted, then stopped the best man's toast so that the soup wouldn't get cold. She told me that I'm a horrible mother for not sending my kids outside to play unsupervised all summer, like she did in the 70s where mums would kick the kids out, lock the doors, and tell kids not to come home until dinner. I nearly died after having my first child, and she told me that God was telling me I'm not fit to be a mum of more kids. After we had our second, she told me that I had my hands full and had no business having a third. After my third child, she told me I had too many children for anyone to ever want to babysit. By the way, she has 3 kids. I keep a very clean house, but I have 3 young boys. They're messy. Before brother-in-law and sister-in-law came to visit one time, she sent a cleaning crew ahead to clean my house so that it would be up to their standards. He's the golden child. Father-in-law lives with us 6 months a year while he collects butterflies for his book. He pays no rent and runs up our utility bills with no thought about it. When we ask him to clean up after himself, he says he didn't realize he'd made such a mess, but thought it was my job as an at-home mum to clean up after the men. He's not invited back for 2016. When she comes to our house to see the kids, I regularly tell her not to get involved in our laundry. She always ignores me, goes through our closets, rifles through our stuff, and then makes comments about what she finds. To be clear, my husband always stands up to her. I was the one who constantly tried to repair their relationship. I finally gave that up last year. We're now essentially no contact with them, and they are not allowed in our house. To talk to the kids on the phone without us supervising, and phone calls are only on holidays. And now, after reading this, the narrator has decided to thoroughly stalk and vet individuals before any deepening of relationship going forward. Who would want a monster like this in their life?
Where do I start? My mother-in-law and my grandmother-in-law are both weird about food. A few years ago, Grandma left a turkey to defrost on the counter for 4 days. My sister-in-law came over, almost fell down due to the smell. Grandma said the turkey needed to be at room temperature for the enzymes to develop. My sister-in-law had to bag it, toss it, and scrub down the kitchen to make it fit for humans again. My mother-in-law had a big dinner one year. Rather than use paper plates, she used real ones. She had about 50 people or so. We didn't go, but about a week later or so we were over. There was lots of snow on the ground and my dogs were out in the yard. One of them kept going over to a snowdrift and digging and digging. We went to see what was up. The plates were all buried in the snow. Rather than run them a bunch at a time through the dishwasher, she left them outside and they were covered by snow. So, service for 50 people, filthy, left outside for a week. No wonder my dog wouldn't leave that snowdrift alone. Nothing says loving like week-old roast beef stuck to a plate in the snowdrift. Last one for now, Grandma was supposed to get a bottle of pickled peppers yesterday, as part of her Christmas gift. In the general chaos of kids and everything, the bottle, still wrapped, broke. It was all mopped up and tossed. We told her, sorry, we'll get you another one. Her response, why did you throw it away? We told her it was broken and the glass was all over the food. She told us we could have washed off the peppers and still eaten them. We told her, no, you'd die, and she refused to believe that. And this is why I never, ever, ever, ever eat anything these people cook. Not ever, not at all. So much to tell, but I'll just say that every once in a while, me and my wife have had to deal with a wellness check from the police because her parents call and tell the police they haven't heard from their daughter in weeks, even though they talked to her the other day. And they also say I'm one of those people who would chop my wife into pieces. Luckily, my step-uncle is a lieutenant in the sheriff's office, and the last time they got a call from the chief telling them to stop. I state I wanted to host Thanksgiving, and I invite all the family. Mother-in-law then invites everyone to her house and not us. Found out when I started calling sisters to firm up plans the week before. Also, the only family member not invited to a niece's baby shower. So done caring after 36 years of being the last invited or not being invited at all. Of course, we always get invited to the work parties. Okay, so my mother-in-law at the time of the story was about 350 pounds. She chain-smoked these terrible all-black cigarettes that were longer and thinner than normal cigarettes, and smelled like death, and she would only wear polyester muumuus that she bought in the 70s. Her voice sounded exactly like Roz from Monsters, Inc., and the only things she would talk about were how hard it was to find a new muumuu, or how her channeling was going, and what the various spirits had to say. The first time I met my mother-in-law, she sat me down and started talking to me about the energies that spoke to her from the Pleiades. As she was telling me about how they were going to fix the world, I realized that to her the Pleiades was one place, a bunch of space lights that were all very close to each other because they're close together from our point of view. When I, in my naivete, tried to explain to her that the stars that make up the constellation are in fact an enormous distance apart, and some of them don't exist anymore, she just scowled at me, shook her head and said, "No," and kept talking. Later that night, my wife and I were awoken by a huge commotion and we found her drunkenly destroying the kitchen. When we asked her what she was doing, she said, "The energies need a burrito." So we made her a burrito and sent her to bed. In conclusion, my mother-in-law is an insane, drunken chain smoker who only wears polyester muumuus and channels the spirits of the aliens who live in the Pleiades, who want a burrito. At my wedding, after the ceremony, our new mother-in-law started yelling at my husband because he made a joke to his father. She then proceeded to storm off, dragging his sisters with her. After about 5 minutes, her F-buddy of the week stomped over and just started going off on my husband for being disrespectful. I was almost certain my reception was going to turn into a brawl. 3 years later, she still hasn't apologized. Oh, where can I start? Gave my 7-month-year-old a scale for her first Christmas so she wouldn't get fat like me. Told my husband that he wasn't allowed to get a vasectomy because he might want kids with his next wife. Told me I was gross and that she didn't know why her son would want to come home to me. The night our daughter was born, she berated my husband for giving our daughter the ugliest name she had ever heard. My grandmother's name and his grandmother's name. Told my mother my name was ridiculous and ugly. This year she cancelled Thanksgiving and Christmas to try and teach us some weird lesson. It was fabulous. I could honestly go on, but she is just a bitter old lady. Called me by the ex-wife's name for a couple of years, and it wasn't as if hubby's first marriage even lasted a year. During visits, if I admired anything in her home, I was told, "You can't have it." I wasn't allowed to do chores to help out. She even took my husband's pants out of my hands when I was doing laundry and pre-treated them with Tilex. Ruined them, but I was to blame for rushing her. If I bought presents for her, I was extravagant. If I did not, I was cheap. If I asked about the family, I was a busybody. If I didn't know the details, I was uncaring. My cooking was all wrong, i.e. healthier than hot brown, overcooked, fatty, salt-laden mystery foods. My best Christmas present from her was an acrylic angel with the wrong birthstone from the dollar clearance bin. She kept giving me angel stuff, and I'm not even remotely religious. If I made suggestions, I was greedy and critical. We now live far away and no time or money to go visit. Sorry. My in-laws weren't terribly interested in me until I got pregnant. Suddenly, they were all about being in my business. They flooded us with unwanted advice and terrifying stories. I stopped giving my sons formula at 3 months because it was too expensive and they're fine. Or when told that the hospital checks our car seat before release, I remember bringing our oldest home from the hospital in my lap and he's fine. Mind you, I'm the same age as their oldest, car seats existed and people like them are probably the reason the hospitals check now. Anyway, this escalated to invading personal space, which included talking to and kissing my belly, even before I had a bump. No matter how many times we told them not to do it, my mother-in-law would swoop in like a ninja when I least expected it. Come wintertime, I had a good-sized baby bump and a maternity coat to cover it. We were leaving the in-laws' house and I already had my coat zipped up, smugly thinking I'd found a way to defend myself. Much to my horror, she starts pawing at the bottom of my jacket and attempts to yank it up. When that doesn't work, she bends over and tries to kiss below the coat, completely misses the bump, and plants one right on the front of my pelvis. I'm frozen, going, "Your mother just kissed my VV," over and over. My husband says, "What the frick, ma?" She just shrugs, says she doesn't care, and walks away. 0 fricks given. Later, my husband negotiated that she just blows kisses from that point forward. Otherwise, I refused to see them. In conclusion, my mother-in-law tried to kiss my baby bump and instead planted one on my hoo-ha. I will note that I've tried to spread out the various charges against different kinds of in-laws, but upwards of 90% of these stories have been mothers-in-law. They just seem to be the most likely kind of crazy to get up in their children's spouse's business, I suppose. Cousins-in-law came to Thanksgiving the day after we buried my grandmother. They ignore her husband of 58 years who's sitting at the table, don't offer any condolences to any family members, and complain when we dedicate the goats to grandma, and not their 4th child with the 3rd husband. Also called me ignorant for not knowing who the American Idol winner was this year. The only saving grace here is that my wife knows how crazy her mum is and has gone no contact with her. Here are some things that happened in no particular order. The big one, father-in-law, who's a pretty good guy, has MS and is basically bedridden. Mother-in-law has been consistently misdosing him on his medication, including giving him sedatives that she's gotten from somewhere. Her adult daughter and her husband moved in to help renovate the house to something that's more handicap accessible for my father-in-law. They spent nearly $20,000 in renovations, remodel and redecoration, along with new appliances for the kitchen. Without warning, my mother-in-law served them with an eviction notice, giving them 3 days to vacate. They live about 2 hours away. In the past 10 years, she's made 2 trips to actually see my daughter. There have been 3 or 4 more trips for things like going to garage sales, where she's made an hour or so visit as part of the trip. For my first Christmas with the extended family, she forgot to buy me a gift, so she went to the freezer and got me a summer sausage that had been in there for nearly 4 years. Nothing says welcome to the family like a ruined, frozen, smoked meat. For another Christmas, I got a giant bottle of Listerine and some toothbrushes. Mother-in-law works at the dentist office and liberated these gifts for me. She saved a ham in the refrigerator to make ham and potato soup. The ham had been in the fridge, not the freezer, for nearly 3 months, and she was still going to use it for the soup. Mother-in-law is making tons of money in land royalties from fracking. Sister-in-law recently saw a royalty check from the oil company and it was over $900,000. Yet mother-in-law won't spend any of that money to refurbish the house or pay someone to provide the kind of care that my father-in-law needs. She's all kinds of fricked up. Not technically my mother-in-law yet, but told me her daughter wasn't ready for a ring after we'd already picked it out and she was asking me when she was going to get it. A few months later, she was contemplating a cross-country move and said to my face if she left, there was no one here that her daughter would stay for. First words to her daughter when she told her of our pregnancy were, "How could you be so stupid? My fiancé is 30, we're doing well, live in the same place, and are due in August. Cut the cord with the mother-in-law." To clarify a bit, my husband was 12 to 16 and watched her alcoholic dad beat her mum. Her mum would in turn get in bed with her or sleep in her room to ride it out for the night. At 18, they divorced, and she went 5 years and received her master's. Came home and has been living with mum since. There is a bond, albeit unhealthy, that neither wants to break. Her mum is lonely, clinically depressed, and suffers from severe anxiety disorder. I've given her every option to slowly get away, which she seems to have no intention of doing. Our relationship is suffering, and I'm not really sure where it's heading. What I do know is that no matter the outcome, I will be the best father to my child that I can be. Actually building the baby's crib today. My in-laws came from a very, very rich family. They're rich enough to take a helicopter ride to another city in order to avoid traffic congestion. This one year, they told us to wait for them before starting dinner because they would like to join us. They promised to arrive at 7 p.m. They finally arrived at 9:15 p.m. 15 minutes later, they left, sister-in-law saying she wasn't feeling well and would like to return to their hotel to rest. We waited more than 2 hours for a 15-minute appearance act. Everyone was teed off. Oh boy, my time to shine. This will be a series of short stories. A little background. First, I'm Mexican-American and my wife is white. Also, her parents are divorced. 1. After she met me, her mother took my then-girlfriend into the kitchen and said she was dating below her. 2. After he first met me, my father was asked by his family what I was like. He only said, "He's a wetback." 3. Since I have now graduated from college, law school, passed the bar exam, and become a practicing attorney, my mother-in-law constantly belittles my wife. Most recently, during dinner, she stated that my wife has lowered her prestige in light of my accomplishments despite my race. 4. When my mother-in-law and her husband visited us for the first time after we got married, we found them in our bedroom uninvited and they were searching for something on our bed. We finally heard their hushed tones and realized they were looking for stains on the sheets. 5. The mother-in-law wanted us to all go to a small town in Alabama to see her family for Thanksgiving. So we went, me a little anxious about what to expect. It was a very awkward experience. I think I might have been the first Mexican they'd ever seen, and then we had Thanksgiving dinner. A relative started describing this program the city initiated, where people can provide aluminium cans in lieu of payment for bus fare. Mother-in-law's husband says, "Beer cans too? Y'all are going to be seeing a ton of Mexicans on the buses." Everyone fell on the floor laughing. My wife and I could only stare at each other in disbelief. 6. This Thanksgiving, mother-in-law and husband invited their contractor to dinner. He's from Colombia and has no family here, so I thought they were being friendly. When he arrived, husband kept trying to get us to speak Spanish to each other because us, being Spanish speakers, we would basically be family. When introducing him, mother-in-law said, "He's from Colombia, but we don't call him a terrorist," and started laughing. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.